Gilfus L-Dragon appeared injured, wandering deep inside a forest. He had just fought against a dragon and managed to defeat it. In his thoughts, he recalled the legend of a sanctuary guarded by a divine dragon, where a golden fruit was said to exist. This fruit was rumored to grant immortality. To think that it actually existed left him in awe. As Gilfus L-Dragon approached the mythical tree, its giant branches engulfed him like ruins from the past. His jaw dropped at the dazzling, glowing fruit of eternal life, like a million fireflies. His victory over the dragon inspired him to conquer martial arts, a feat unimagined by mortal beings. Driven by unwavering determination and a heart pounding like a drum, he devoured the immortal fruit, relishing each bite like one last treasure. Like an epic tale unfolding, Gilfus L-Dragon, the Earth's mightiest warrior, was destined to etch his name in history. What was stopping him? His newfound power cemented his legacy, leaving nothing standing against him. Decades later, the scene shifted to the royal palace of the L-Dragon family. Gilfus, now old and frail, lay on his deathbed, surrounded by many people. They murmured that it was only a matter of time, and that at his age, he should be allowed to pass peacefully. His eldest son, Gillum, held his hand with sorrow, unable to contain his grief. But Gilfus dismissed his son's emotions, saying his time had simply come, and he would not indulge in such sentimental nonsense. Gillum lamented that the estate would be so empty without him and his mother. Gilfus gently cradled his grandchild's head in his final breaths, reminiscing about their shared life. The train of realization struck him, reminding him that life's legend was merely a tale. Despite this, he felt blessed to have his loving family, making him the happiest man alive. What could be more beautiful than that? The church's father then spoke, acknowledging that Gilfus L-Dragon had lived a long, full life. Gilfus thought to himself that he had no regrets, but he immediately recognized the lie in those words. In truth, he did have regrets. If only he had more time, he thought desperately. If only he had more time. With his last breath, Gilfus cried out, yearning still for the peak of martial arts. Witnessing this, his son Gillum broke down in tears, devastated by his father's state. The narration explained that Gilfus L-Dragon's life should have ended there. The scene took a wild twist. Suddenly, a newborn baby appeared on the screen. But hold on a second. Inside that tiny little head were the thoughts of a full-grown man. Can you believe it? This baby was questioning everything. Like, was he dreaming? Why did the walls feel like they could be blown over with a sneeze? And what the hell was up with his body feeling lighter than a feather? His hands? They looked like they belonged to a damn doll. But wait for it. This wasn't just any baby. No. This was Gilfus L-Dragon, the legendary martial arts guru, reincarnated into this pint-sized package. Talk about a plot twist. Panic gripped him as he took stock of his bizarre new reality. He tried to chill out, but the truth hit him like a ton of bricks. A 10-star martial artist reduced to this? Seriously, what kind of cosmic joke was this? He couldn't help but think, who in the universe could pull off something this insane? Then, like a light bulb flicking on in his head, his thoughts darted to the mythical fruit of immortality. But guess what? It dawned on him that the real deal wasn't immortality at all. It was reincarnation. Boom. Mind blown. Suddenly, a grin spread across his tiny face like the sun breaking through clouds. He thought, hell yeah, what a stroke of luck! With this incredible second chance, he was determined to climb to the very pinnacle of martial arts. Watch out, world! Gilfus L-Dragon is back, and he's not going down without a fight. He then heard the cries of other babies around him. He noted their presence and thought about his situation. If he was in a separate building, then he must have been reborn into the L-Dragon family once again. But he questioned why so many babies were gathered together. A maid of the L-Dragon family entered, carrying a red liquid. She announced that it was feeding time and proceeded to check on the babies. Gilfus observed as the maids forcefully held down a goblin and made it drink the red liquid. Shocked, he wondered why a goblin was there and what they were planning. The goblin consumed the drink, and its body exploded violently, splattering blood all over Gilfus. Disturbed, he tried to understand what had just happened. The maids calmly remarked that the liquid should be fine if diluted enough. With that, they began feeding it to the babies. Gilfus, horrified, realized what was happening. He recognized that this was not milk. The liquid was brimming with terrifying magical power. Babies were being fed something dangerously potent. He reminded himself that he was a baby now and could not react too strongly. When the maid approached him with the red drink, he braced himself. The taste shocked him. He identified it as ancient dragon's blood. He could not believe it. The maids had diluted the blood, but it was still incredibly dangerous. Panic struck him, fearing he might spit it out, but he considered a tiny sip wouldn't be catastrophic. Upon looking around, the baby's instinctive reactions to the drink made him doubt his decision. Was it worth escaping his previous life for a chance at greatness? Amidst uncertainty, he realized the drink was magical blood, potentially giving him access to unimaginable martial arts prowess. However, he hesitated as the maid rushed in, forcing him to drink every drop. His body absorbed the blood, and something inside him awoke from a sleep, ready for an incredible adventure. In the end, he seized the moment despite the maid's insistence, realizing this was more than just a drink. It was a means to escape his past, rise to greatness, and potentially save his life. The magic blood awakened a sleeping part of him, leading to a wild adventure with newfound possibilities. Gilfus seethed in anger, determined that no one should underestimate Gilfus L-Dragon. Watching his reaction, the maid wondered if this baby was really any different from the others. While drinking milk, Gilfus silently vowed to absorb all of the ancient dragon's source power. With it, he believed he could pursue the ultimate heights of martial arts that had eluded him in his previous life. To his surprise, the power was absorbed with unexpected ease, which he considered perfect. When the babies finished drinking, Gilfus lay on his bed with red traces of the drink still on his lips, relieved that he had somehow managed it. He noticed the other babies had survived as well and realized that a baby's survival instinct could not be underestimated. His body felt heavy, his strength extraordinary, but soon sleep overtook him. The scene shifted 7 years later. A young boy, nearly 7, trained relentlessly. With a heavy stone strapped to his legs, he performed inverted sit-ups, repeating the motion 1,000 times. He admired his own physique, attributing it to the blood of the ancient dragon. The boy was revealed to be none other than the former L-Dragon family head, Gilfus, now reborn as Zeke L-Dragon. It was explained that all living beings possessed source power. The blood of the ancient dragon, which Zeke and the other babies had been forced to drink, contained immense amounts of it. The babies who consumed it gained bodies far stronger than ordinary people. Zeke alone, who completely absorbed all of the dragon's source power, experienced changes that astonished even himself. Alongside this power, he carried within him the source power of the divine dragon he had defeated in his previous life. As Zeke trained, a golden glow flickered faintly from his chest. He lamented that he still had only 1 star, far below the 4 stars he believed he should have reached by now. Stars were explained as the compression of one's source power to the limit, floating within the body as if it were a universe. The more stars one possessed, the stronger they became. However, each increase in number was harder to achieve. In his past life, Gilfus L-Dragon had reached the unprecedented level of 10 stars, the only existence of its kind in the world. Reflecting on his current life, Zeke admitted that time had flown. 7 years had passed since his rebirth as the illegitimate child of the current L-Dragon family head. His mother had already passed away, and his father had never shown his face even once. He questioned his father's qualities, but more than that, he pondered the meaning of being born 1,000 years later. Reincarnation itself was shocking, but awakening in such a distant future was even more so. The world had changed into a brutal place where only the fittest survived. The dragon trial was the prime example of this harsh reality. Infants were made to drink the blood of ancient dragons, and only those who survived were allowed to receive education as L-Dragon warriors. Yet in Zeke's case, 7 years had passed and no instructor had ever come. One day, a maid approached. Zeke stared at her, preparing to question her. But before he could, she told him she could not answer. Frustrated, he declared that the situation was clearly strange. Those who passed the trial were supposed to receive combat training, yet only maids surrounded him. She coldly asked if there was a problem. Zeke replied that he was not troubled, but reminded himself that physical conditioning was more important than combat education at the moment, something he could handle on his own. What he truly wanted was information about the other children or the main family. But the maid repeated that she could not answer. Zeke pressed her again, insisting that he was only asking about family matters. But once more she denied him. With a sharp glare, he challenged her, only for her to again repeat the same words. He wondered aloud if his treatment was not too harsh, but she explained that their only orders were to attend to his daily needs. Observing her quietly, Zeke realized this maid was a 3-star level practitioner. For simple combat education, even she would suffice. Turning away in frustration, he dismissed it, declaring he would head to the forest. Living together for 7 years with only minimal interaction was far too unusual, and it seemed the family had chosen to ignore him entirely. In the forest, Zeke trained with poisonous grass. He forced himself to eat it, disgusted by its taste, admitting it was terrible but still useful as training in patience. Yet even as he endured, he felt a constant gaze following him. He wished he could do something about it, but knew that his watchers would not reveal themselves over something so trivial. With irritation, he brushed aside bushes, releasing a wave of negative aura, and came face to face with an anger boar. He noticed the black mist surrounding the beast, something that had not existed 1,000 years ago. The sight made him wonder about this new phenomenon. The boar grew more enraged, its body shrouded in the ominous aura, and charged straight at him. Zeke swiftly dodged and countered with a devastating punch, dropping the beast with a single blow. He noted that lightly tapping an opponent of the same 1-star level produced immense power in his case. Hoisting the fallen boar onto his shoulder, he reflected on the importance of the quality of stars. Growing restless with the constant neglect, he wondered if he should leave on a journey. If he did, the sea would be his destination. Unbeknownst to him, a hidden observer had been watching closely. This man was shocked by what he witnessed. Without any training, Zeke had manifested a star and defeated an anger boar in 1 strike. Even more alarming was that Zeke had noticed his hidden presence. The man thought about Zeke's circumstances. His mother had died young, and his father had shown no interest in him. There was no way such a child could have received proper education. Yet because the head's blood flowed in his veins, Zeke was never allowed to escape from the family and was constantly monitored. Though illegitimate, he was still of the head's bloodline. The man found this intriguing and considered the child's future worth watching. When Zeke returned home, he immediately sensed an unfamiliar presence inside. He felt the pressure of 3 4-star fighters and 1 at 5 stars. He wondered what such skilled warriors wanted with him. Since there were no nearby rifts, there was little chance of chaos. Their presence did not feel hostile, nor did it resemble an assassination attempt. Inside, he noticed the emblem of L-Dragon, and he demanded to know their business. One of the men with the L-Dragon emblem stepped forward and explained that this was their first meeting. They had come to escort Master Zeke, who must undergo an examination. Shock swept through Zeke as he realized he was being summoned to an exam. He cried out in frustration, pointing out that he had not been taught anything at all. Zeke returned once again to the main estate. Feeling bored, he thought he had never expected to return there. After that, he explained that he was brought back to the main family by messengers, who had come from the main house. They told him he would need to change clothes, since he could not enter the grounds like that. He found himself questioning why he could not enter. However, it was not to live at the main house. Instead, it was to enter Utornet, the dragon's nest, 72%. It seemed that during 1,000 years, the L-Dragon family had created a dedicated educational institution. All those born into the L-Dragon family aimed to enter this dragon's nest, receiving education in their respective homes until the age of 7. Today marked that entrance examination. Zeke realized he had not been taught anything at all. Yet taking the exam was mandatory. For that reason, he was brought all the way from the frontier. Sitting down from the tension of the exam, frustrated, he held his head and wondered why they could not have done this earlier, just when he had been thinking of leaving after all that preparation. At that moment, a blue-haired boy appeared. He was Rangus from Ordscale Village. Feeling hesitant, Rangus asked if Zeke was troubled. Zeke looked at him in disgust and demanded to know who he was. Rangus introduced himself, saying that he thought Zeke seemed to be in trouble. Observing him carefully, Zeke thought that the boy looked timid but was quite perceptive. He apologized and confirmed Rangus's name, introducing himself as Zeke. He admitted he was confused about what exactly they would be made to do. Rangus hesitated and explained that the test content did not change every year. Zeke admitted he did not know what the test involved. A man with zero background, he had no knowledge of it. Shocked, Rangus repeated the question, unable to believe he truly did not know. He thought to himself that not knowing about the test was way too reckless and wondered if Zeke would be okay. Rangus began to explain what was involved in the test. Suddenly, someone mocked him from behind, calling him a weakling. Startled, Rangus froze. The one mocking him was Retin, also from Ordscale Village. Retin glared and asked why Rangus was there, accusing him of being lost and telling him to go home before he got hurt. Nervously, Rangus replied that of course he was there for the Dragon's Nest exam. Retin laughed and mocked him further, claiming there was no way he could even get in, pointing out that his father was a pseudo-dragon. He sneered, questioning what a pseudo-dragon's child could even do. Zeke explained to himself that the Eldragon family had a clear hierarchy established by an absolute monarch. At the bottom were novice whelp dragons, followed by regular soldier child dragons. Above them stood captain-level adult dragons, then executive-level elder dragons or elders. And at the very bottom were the pseudo-dragons, those who could not enter the dragon's nest or could not graduate, labeled with the meaning of immature ones. Yet Zeke believed he wanted to prove that they were not fake. He questioned Retin, asking why he thought so without even trying. Retin snapped back, demanding to know who Zeke was and whether he had a problem. Calmly, Zeke explained it was just a pure question, asking why it was impossible for Rangus. Retin responded that it was obvious, because Rangus was weak. Hearing this, Rangus's face fell. Zeke countered by saying that Rangus was probably much stronger than them. Angered, Retin shouted, demanding if Zeke was saying they were below this weakling. Just then, the adult dragon examiner arrived, calling for attention. The Dragon's Nest entrance examination was about to begin. All applicants were told to register in order and quickly move with their number tags. Hearing this, Retin prepared to leave, but as he walked away, he threatened Zeke, saying he would remember his face. Zeke turned to Rangus, remarking that the boy had not needed to get that angry. Thinking to himself that young people these days were so short-tempered, Rangus stammered, pointing out that they were the same age, and anyone would get angry being told that he was stronger. Zeke considered this and asked if that was so, but reminded him that the entrance exam was mandatory. Therefore, calling it impossible was meaningless. Rangus explained that one could actually withdraw, and commented that Zeke really did not know anything. Surprised, Zeke admitted he had not known and asked again if withdrawal was possible. Rangus told him he might be better off withdrawing too. At least that way he would not get hurt. Zeke replied that someone of his skill level could not withdraw even if he tried. Rangus found this to be quite the confidence, especially since Zeke did not even know the test content. But Zeke brushed it off, saying whatever, and urged Rangus to hurry or the test would start. Rangus agreed, though hesitantly. Soon, all the students gathered at the examination place. The adult examiner explained that the test was simple. If they could scratch the rock, they would pass. No weapons other than those provided were allowed, but bare hands were fine. All they needed to do was make a scratch, nothing more. However, they only had 3 attempts. Hearing this, the students grew nervous. Except for Zeke. He found it to be a surprisingly easy test. Rangus was shocked at his reaction. Zeke explained that it was just scratching the rock. He thought back to having gone through such a crazy ritual like the dragon trial, expecting some terrifying test to be waiting, and found it anticlimactic. The examiner began, and one boy made the first attempt, striking the stone with his sword. The sound rang out so loud that students covered their ears. But the stone did not break. Instead, the boy's hand was cut, and the sword shattered. Collapsing from the pain, he fell to the ground. The examiner announced the first attempt had failed, with 2 remaining, and asked if he would try again. But the attempt was considered abandoned. The examiner ordered for it to be cleaned up and called for the next student to step forward. Another student attempted. Rangus covered his ears from the noise. Watching this, Zeke grew angry. He realized that this was the test. He wondered about the stone, then recognized it as a regeneration stone. It instantly repaired minor scratches, and when attacked with brute force, it had the property of reflecting back with hundreds of times the power. Zeke thought that was too ridiculous of a material. Rangus explained that if one properly circulated source power through the body and attacked, the stone would get scratched. Zeke understood, realizing that from what he heard, the quality of martial arts learned seemed less important than handling source power. Looking around, he thought that quite a few would be able to pass the test, including those guys from earlier. One by one, students failed. Finally, it was number 315's turn, Zeke himself. He announced it was his turn. Rangus nervously warned him that it was still possible to withdraw, but Zeke, stepping down with calm confidence, told him not to worry. The examiner watched in surprise, impressed by his composure. Then the examiner was shocked as an aura began to rise from behind. Zeke. Behind him was the reflection of Gilphus Eldragon. Zeke twisted his hand, observing the weapons from that collection. Zeke arrived at the examination grounds without carrying any weapon. The examiners looked at him with surprise and questioned his choice. He declared with certainty that a weapon was unnecessary, as his fist alone was enough. Hearing this, the other candidates began whispering among themselves. Some remarked in disbelief that he was planning to go bare-handed. Others doubted his chances, insisting that even with mastery over source power, he could not leave a scratch without a weapon. Among them, Rangus grew extremely anxious. In his mind, he imagined Zeke's fist shattering or even his whole arm flying apart. He regretted not stopping him more forcefully and doubted the decision altogether. The examiner gave the signal to begin. Zeke turned his gaze to the enormous stone before him. Observing carefully, he realized it was a mineral he had never seen before, likely a product of 1,000 years of change. He touched the stone and thought of how many things remained beyond his understanding, but decided it did not matter. He focused his mind, activating the power in his fist. Rangus panicked further and tried to intervene, convinced that he had to stop Zeke after all. Meanwhile, Zeke's excitement grew as he prepared to unleash his full power as he was now. Channeling his strength, he launched his attack, calling forth Dragon Destruction Combat Arts, First Form, Burst Strike. Rangus was stunned at the sight of such immense power. The moment Zeke's fist collided with the stone, a massive explosion erupted, the air spinning violently in every direction. The gathered crowd gasped in shock, some exclaiming in awe. Even the examiners were surprised, though they controlled their reactions. Zeke realized that the technique was still too advanced for his current state. The giant stone split in half and shattered, scattering pieces across the ground. His hand was heavily injured, yet he laughed at the pain, declaring that he still needed much more training. The other candidates were left speechless, staring at him in disbelief. Retin, irritated, muttered about Zeke having shattered it. A young girl in the crowd, however, watched with interest, clearly impressed. Rangus, overwhelmed by both shock and relief, saw Zeke smiling despite his wounds and could not hide his surprise. The examiner, silently astonished, analyzed what had just happened. He realized Zeke had managed to destroy a regeneration stone, something only possible at a 4-star level or higher. For such a child to do it was unthinkable. Even as an illegitimate child, the bloodline of the Eldragon head was evident. Yet the technique Zeke used felt strangely familiar. Zeke approached and asked about his results. The examiner announced that candidate number 315 had passed. Another examiner handed Zeke a liquid, urging him to move along quickly. Zeke accepted it with irritation, finding their attitude prickly and lacking composure. Rangus rushed over, eyes shining with admiration, praising Zeke as amazing. Zeke dismissed the feat as easy. Rangus then noticed the liquid and explained that it was healing poison. Confused, Zeke questioned the term, but Rangus casually opened the bottle and confirmed it was the standard kind. Examining it closely, Zeke doubted it was poison. He realized it must be spirit medicine. The narration explained that this was cloud-piercing clarity wood, a medicine created from rare herbs that sprouted in secret realms, combined with high-purity source power cores from divine and phantom beasts. Its effects instantly healed injuries, erased old scars, and even increased source power. However, the rarity of its materials made it nearly impossible to refine, meaning it rarely appeared in the world. Zeke consumed the medicine and his injuries healed instantly. He became excited, asking if it truly was spirit medicine. Rangus explained that while he did not know about spirit medicine, the Eldragon family's healing potions were far superior to common ones, and it was not so surprising. Zeke countered, stating it was indeed surprising, as such severe wounds had healed instantly. He confirmed to himself that unlike true spirit medicine, It did not increase source power. Rangus commented that Zeke himself had been more amazing. Zeke brushed it off, calling the idea ridiculous. Looking at the empty bottle, he thought of how this was proof of the wisdom. Humanity had gained over 1,000 years. Both boys returned to the candidate seats. Rangus again expressed his admiration, saying Zeke was incredibly strong. Zeke answered casually, stating his goal was to be the strongest. Rangus was left astonished at how casually he said such things. The examinations continued. Candidate number 383 passed, followed by 395 and then number 4. Those with serious injuries were also given healing poison. Watching them, Zeke reflected that their passing was expected. The next candidate called was number 414, Rangus. Shaking nervously, he stepped forward. Zeke noticed his trembling and asked why he was so nervous. He tried to encourage him, shouting that he should have no problem and needed to pull himself together. His loud voice drew everyone's attention, embarrassing Rangus, who begged him not to shout so much. Zeke watched curiously, wondering what Rangus was doing. Rangus gripped his sword and prepared. When the examiner gave the signal to begin, he swung with all his might but collapsed immediately. The examiner declared the first attempt a failure with 2 remaining. Rangus requested another try, determined to succeed. He attempted again, but this time his sword slipped from his hand and fell, leaving him panicked and trembling. Some candidates laughed, mocking him. One called him a pseudo-dragon's child, unworthy and incapable. Another demanded that he give up. Retin joined in, taunting Zeke by asking what he had said earlier, reminding him that he had claimed Rangus was stronger than them. Zeke, angered, shouted for them to stop spouting nonsense. Retin laughed louder, calling it ridiculous. The examiner reminded Rangus that one attempt remained and asked if he would try again. Rangus panicked further, unsure of what to do. At that moment, Zeke approached and questioned why. Rangus insisted on using a sword instead of a spear. Rangus, confused, asked what he meant. Zeke pressed the point, asking why he had taken up an unsuitable weapon with no plan. From the sidelines, Retin mocked him again, claiming that no matter how hard Rangus tried, he could not make a scratch with a sword. The others laughed as well, calling him stupid. They continued mocking, pointing out that his father never used spears and had taught him swordsmanship. Another candidate agreed, saying that changing weapons would not help. Ignoring them, Zeke asked the examiner if changing weapons mid-test was against the rules. The examiner clarified that there was no problem. Zeke told Rangus that it was good news for him and asked if he would leave it at that. Though still afraid, Rangus recalled his past words. Summoning courage, he rose to his feet and declared that he would try using the spear. The scene shifted toward Rangus. He explained that his father could not enter the dragon's nest. His father was called a pseudo-dragon and ridiculed. Even so, his father never became bitter and raised him with pride. The Rangus that his father raised was not a fake. Today, here, he would prove that. Rangus thought to himself that if he tried again with the sword as it was, the result would remain the same. Instead, he decided to trust Zeke. Yet he wondered how to use a spear. Zeke instructed him to thrust straight without thinking about anything, simply thrusting forward. Rangus accepted and repeated to himself that he would thrust straight forward. He thought that normally, just thrusting with a spear he had never held before should not be able to scratch the regeneration stone. But he remembered Zeke's words, asking how one could tell without even trying yet. He admitted that although they had only met today, it felt strange, but he understood. Since Zeke believed in him, he would try believing in himself too. Until now, he had only held a sword, and never before had source power flowed through him this much. With determination, Rangus struck the rock with the spear. Retin and his friends laughed, declaring that just changing weapons would not make him succeed. Yet Rangus felt as if the spear had been part of his body from the start. His thrust pierced into the rock, breaking it halfway. Retin and his friends were left shocked. The examiners exclaimed in surprise, astonished that he had not only scratched the stone, but pierced through it. Zeke praised Rangus as magnificent and well done. Startled, Rangus could not comprehend what he had just done. The examiner announced that number 414 had passed. Rangus repeated the word passed in disbelief. Zeke encouraged him further, telling him it was exactly as he thought. Overcome with joy, Rangus hugged Zeke with tears in his eyes, shouting that he really had passed. Zeke calmly reminded him that he had been saying that all along. Retton's friends tried to dismiss it as coincidence, insisting it had to be. The examiner declared the examination concluded and announced that the entrance ceremony would now begin. Zeke turned to Rangus, asking if that was all for the test. Rangus explained that there might be other tests after they entered. When Zeke wondered what they would do then, Rangus explained that it was not what they would do. The examiner then announced that the leadership of the Eldragon family would give congratulatory speeches. The current Eldragon family head, Balza Eldragon, made his entrance. Zeke looked at him and wondered about the gloomy-looking man. Rangus explained that it was the family head. Zeke found it odd, thinking the head could at least be more cheerful, even remarking to himself that ice would be warmer. Embarrassed, Rangus quickly covered Zeke's mouth, begging him to stay quiet, pleading with him again to please remain silent. Balza Eldragon stood before them. Zeke observed that this was the current strength of the Eldragon family. He noted quite several 7-star levels, a fair number of 6-star levels, and at the center, the head himself. Balza Eldragon had reached the 8-star level. 1,000 years ago, there had not even been a dozen such people in the entire world. Zeke admitted he did not know about this era, but concluded he did not like him. Quietly, he thought to himself that this man was his father. The examiners called for attention, announcing the words from Master Balza. Balza declared for them to strive to become the flesh and blood of Eldragon. As he spoke, a negative aura flowed from his body. Black energy spread out, a crushing pressure that made the students unable even to breathe. Zeke sensed it and thought that even the will of others was being overwhelmed by his presence. He admitted he did not know what had happened, but strongly felt that he disliked him. What he sensed was tremendous hatred. Suddenly, another man entered, cheerful and laughing. He declared how grateful the words of Master Balza had been, and announced that Balza had high expectations for them all. Zeke wondered who this man was. The cheerful man went on, saying he would leave the stiff greetings to others and would not say much, urging the young ones to strive forward. Zeke again thought about who he was. The examiners reacted to the man's words, remarking on the unusual way he had put things. The cheerful man simply stated that those who worried about little things would end up bald. Zeke did not understand, but he felt thankful that the atmosphere had changed. The examiners then moved on to the next step, announcing that they would now declare the dormitory assignments. Those called should move promptly. Zeke questioned if they were not all going to the same place. Rangus explained that there were 4 dragon's nests, and students permitted to enter were assigned to the east, west, south, and north halls, respectively. Zeke acknowledged this with understanding. Then Zeke's name was called. Number 315 was summoned. Zeke turned to Rangus, telling him it was his turn and to take care. Rangus wished him the same. At the Dragon's Nest East Hall, Zeke began searching for his room. He remarked to himself that after 1,000 years, things had changed here and there. He turned, checked his path, and finally found it. He admitted with relief that he had gotten lost and arrived late, realizing his roommate was probably already inside. He opened the door, apologizing for the wait, and said that from today, they would be sharing the same room. But as soon as his eyes met his roommate, Zeke froze in shock. Zeke felt an unexpected sense of familiarity when he saw his teammate. It was Rangus. The sight made him genuinely happy. A bright, confident smile appeared on his face, the kind that reflected pure satisfaction. It seemed fate had drawn him together with Rangus, and that realization filled him with a strange comfort. Rangus also smiled back, relieved to no longer be alone. Being paired with someone he knew eased his anxiety. As they settled down, Zeke asked if there were any plans left for the day. Rangus replied that there weren't, and reminded him that training would begin tomorrow without delay. Zeke agreed casually, though it was clear he hadn't paid attention earlier. Rangus sighed, realizing Zeke hadn't listened to the instructor at all. Zeke simply admitted it with a carefree thumbs up, showing no regret. Rangus scolded him, insisting it wasn't something to brag about. He advised they sleep early since training would start immediately the next morning. Rangus then thought about how he had wanted to escape from that dull, suffocating house and begin a journey that might lead to something greater. The entrance exam had already shown him so many fascinating things, and he hoped that staying with the Eldragon family for a while might not be so bad after all. A month quickly passed. The instructor stood before all the trainees, shouting for everyone to listen up. He spoke of the Great Dragon's Breath, a powerful breathing technique created by the 15th head of the Eldragon family. It was a skill they all had to master perfectly in every situation. His words echoed through the hall as the sound of strained breathing filled the air. The students trained with heavy dumbbells in both hands, their faces drenched in sweat. Each movement demanded complete focus. Rangus was visibly exhausted, his body trembling under the weight. He looked as though he could collapse any second. The instructor observed the group closely, noticing that several students had already begun to grasp the fundamentals of Dragon's Breath. Among them, Master Lika's power stood out. Her source energy overflowed slightly, showing signs of nearing the T level. But then his eyes landed on Zeke. What he saw left him in disbelief. Zeke was performing the same exercises as everyone else, yet with rocks balanced not only in his hands, but even on his head. The instructor stared, trying to understand what he was witnessing. Zeke was of the head's bloodline, but he had supposedly received no formal instruction. Still, his mastery appeared beyond ordinary comprehension. Meanwhile, Zeke reflected inwardly. He realized that the breathing method he had once created, the Dragon King's breath, had evolved over time and spread as Dragon's Breath. Breathing techniques were designed to draw in atmospheric source power, circulate it within the body, and enhance one's own energy. The true effectiveness of such techniques depended entirely on the user's skill and creativity. That was why each prestigious family had developed its own unique version, keeping them as carefully guarded secrets. The current Dragon's Breath was safe and easy to learn, but it could only be used while resting. Zeke thought he didn't need such limitations. He recalled how his original Dragon King's Breath allowed full manipulation of source power even during movement. Its effects had been extraordinary, though very few could inherit it due to its extreme difficulty. Over the centuries, his creation had been simplified so that anyone could use it, boosting the strength of the entire family. Realizing that his technique had survived the test of 1,000 years, even in altered form, filled him with deep emotion. It was astonishing to see how the world had changed, and curiosity burned in him to find out whether other martial arts had transformed as well. The thought thrilled him beyond measure. As days passed, lunchtime arrived. All students sat together eating, recovering from the morning's harsh training. Some cast disgusted looks at Zeke, who was devouring food at a startling pace. His appetite seemed endless, as if he hadn't eaten for 1,000 years and was finally being allowed to satisfy his hunger. His unrestrained eating made him look like a wild creature among them. He turned toward Rangus and commented on his dull expression, urging him to eat more if he wanted to grow stronger. Rangus looked at him, bewildered by his boundless energy, calling his stamina unnatural. Zeke brushed it off, claiming others were simply too weak. He insisted that more food and harder training were the keys to real strength. He even offered to help Rangus, but then went back to eating his own meal. As Zeke glanced around, he observed others quietly, noting that a few students were indeed well-trained. Then a blonde girl approached him with a bright smile, praising him for his impressive strength. Zeke looked at Rangus, puzzled by her sudden approach, and asked who she was. Rangus, caught off guard, choked on his drink and nearly spilled water everywhere. Shocked, he whispered to Zeke that the girl was none other than Master Lika, the daughter of the head himself and one of the next head candidates. Zeke remained calm and said he had no idea who she was. Rangus panicked, reminding him that she wasn't someone ordinary people should talk to casually. Zeke replied nonchalantly that he was also the head's son, though illegitimate. Lika's curiosity deepened as she asked if that was true. Her identity soon became clear. She was Lika Typhona Eldragon, one of the most promising successors of the family. Zeke confirmed his statement, questioning why he would lie about such a thing. Lika then challenged his claim by asking how someone with no official backing could possess such incredible power, strong enough to shatter the regeneration stone with his bare hands. Zeke dismissed her doubts, saying it was simply because he was himself. Rangus stood by silently, unsure how to react. Lika, still intrigued, smiled brightly. She found his confidence fascinating and asked if he would serve under her. She offered to become his support, promising to use her position to help him gain influence in return for his power aiding her rise to become the head. She assured him that once she achieved that goal, she would treat him well. Zeke declined without hesitation. The light in Lika's eyes dimmed instantly, her cheerful expression vanishing. She demanded to know why he refused and accused him of aiming for the head position himself. Zeke studied her calmly, thinking about her abilities. She was already close to the 2-star level, capable of releasing aura from her body at a young age. That level of power fascinated him, but his ambitions were different. He told her he had no interest in family matters or positions of power. Lika's anger flared. Her voice rose as she demanded to know what else he wanted, if not authority. Zeke's patience broke. In frustration, he slammed his knife onto the bench. A surge of raw energy erupted around him, shaking the atmosphere. His eyes glowed with power as an overwhelming aura spread through the hall. His voice carried pure dominance as he declared that he would never serve under anyone because he was the strongest. The intensity of his energy stunned Lika. For a brief moment, she found herself trembling, realizing she was overwhelmed by his presence. Rangis rushed to Zeke's side, pleading for him to calm down. But Lika only smiled bitterly, her pride wounded. Her voice trembled between fury and thrill as she declared that if he wouldn't serve her willingly, she would make him submit through force. She challenged him to a duel. Word of their confrontation spread rapidly throughout the academy. Soon, every student knew that the head's daughter, Lika, was going to fight someone. The news drew everyone to the training grounds, curiosity and disbelief filling the air. Crowds gathered, whispering in shock as they realized Zeke was her opponent. The tension grew thick as the two faced each other. Zeke seemed calm, almost amused, while Rangis panicked beside him, asking if he was truly okay. Lika was not just any opponent. She was the head's daughter and a prodigy from one of the 4 great families supporting the Eldragons. Zeke remained unfazed, barely acknowledging the warnings. He pointed out that Rangis had suddenly switched to formal speech, which Rangis admitted was out of respect for Zeke's lineage. Zeke only shrugged, telling him to do as he liked. Rangis grew desperate, urging him to reconsider the duel. He reminded Zeke that Lika had mastered every form of the Tefona family's lightning great sword technique at the age of 7, a feat unmatched by anyone else. She possessed incredible talent and strength, but Zeke only caught a few words of that explanation, focusing solely on the fact that she was the head's daughter. Everything else slipped past his attention. Rangis was exasperated, asking why he didn't take things seriously. Zeke laughed lightly, saying that not knowing made the situation even more entertaining. It would only make the fight more exciting. Rangis, on the verge of panic, shouted that even if Zeke was strong, Lika was still too powerful, and facing her was pure disadvantage. He couldn't understand why Zeke had accepted the challenge. Zeke's answer was simple. He never backed down from a fight. If someone challenged him, he would face them head-on. Besides, Lika already seemed prepared. As both of them stepped onto the training ground, the atmosphere changed. Lika raised her sword, her confidence radiating through every movement. The idle chatter ended as the real battle was about to begin. Zeke stood with a confident smirk, his voice calm, yet filled with challenge as he told Lika that everything was already set. On the other side, Rangis, nervous and scared, ran off while asking Zeke to be careful. Zeke turned toward Lika, amused, telling her that being careful depended on her, not him. He questioned her determination, wondering why she was so eager to challenge him. Lika, filled with pride and resolve, declared her intention to become the head of the family. To achieve that, she needed to make Zeke submit and join her. Zeke looked annoyed, demanding to know what that had to do with with him. Lika, irritated by his ignorance, asked if he didn't even know his own family's situation, implying it was because he was an illegitimate child. Zeke turned his gaze aside and admitted he might know if she asked him directly. Lika's tone grew serious as she began to explain. She revealed that including both of them, there were 5 candidates for the next head. Everyone except Zeke was aligned with one of the 4 branch families of El Dragon. The branch that produced the next head was what mattered. They were all gathered at the dragon's nest, representing their families and competing for dominance. She needed more power to stand against her older brothers. Zeke thought about it briefly, realizing it was a clash among the 4 branches. Complex matters he didn't care much for. He said he understood but wasn't sure he truly got it. Lika, maintaining her firm tone, stated that as a candidate for the next head, she had to strengthen her base even further. That was why she had decided to defeat him right there. With that, Lika lunged forward, attacking Zeke with all her might. Yet Zeke moved faster than a leopard, dodging easily as her strike missed. Lika attacked again and again, her frustration building, while Zeke effortlessly avoided every blow, smiling at her failed attempts. Furious, Lika vowed not to let him escape. The observing students whispered among themselves, astonished by the fight. They noted her speed, her precise control over source power, and how her attacks kept getting faster. They realized this was the true power of a branch heir, the strength of the head's children. It seemed only a matter of time before the battle would be decided. But Lika's continuous attacks brought her no victory. Frustration filled her face as Zeke kept dodging, still mocking her. He taunted her for trying so long without landing even a single proper scratch, questioning her weak strikes. Lika's shock and anger grew, while Rangus, watching from afar, was amazed by Zeke's overwhelming strength. Zeke calmly analyzed her movements, noting that her martial art was one he had never seen before, and her speed was far beyond what a 1-star could usually achieve. Lika, growing more enraged, launched another fierce attack, shouting for him to stop talking and focus on the match. Zeke assured her that he was focused, tightening his fist as a powerful aura surged from his hand. With explosive force, he struck her in the stomach, sending her flying backward as blood spilled from her mouth. He told her that was what focus meant, being able to attack like that. Lika crashed to the ground, gasping in pain. The watching students were stunned, murmuring that Lady Lika's attack had missed and wondering who this powerful boy was. Still on the ground, Lika gritted her teeth, overwhelmed by pain and disbelief. She couldn't understand why her attacks wouldn't connect. For a 1-star, her speed was supposed to be incredible. She should have been far faster. Zeke looked down at her calmly, his tone like that of a teacher giving a lecture. He admitted that she was indeed faster than the 1-stars he had seen before, but she was still just a 1-star. Lika snapped back, insisting that he was also a 1-star and shouldn't be able to keep up with her movements. Zeke responded with composed confidence. It was simple, he explained. Through breathing, eye movements, and muscle shifts, most actions could be predicted. The rest was merely experience. His expression showed how natural this all was for him, as if these movements required no effort. That confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the result of experience, because in his previous life, he had truly been a powerful swordsman. Seizing the moment when Zeke's focus slightly drifted, Lika pushed herself up and attacked again, shouting in defiance. But once more, her strike missed completely, passing right in front of Zeke's face. He calmly told her that he could read every movement she made, that in just a second, he could understand where and how she would attack. Then, in a blur of motion, Zeke delivered a devastating punch. The impact sent Lika flying across the arena, crashing violently into the wall. The wall cracked apart under the force, and her condition turned dire. The students watching were speechless. Shock filled the room as they whispered in disbelief, unable to accept that Lady Lika had actually lost. Rangus, unable to contain his excitement, cheered loudly for Zeke, praising his incredible strength. To defeat Lady Lika in such a way was beyond anything they had imagined. Zeke stood firmly, watching the fallen girl before him. He raised his hand slightly and muttered that it wasn't over yet. He noticed that Lika had focused all her source power at her core to withstand his previous blow. Impressed, he acknowledged that she was truly something remarkable. Lika's condition, however, looked terrible. Blood flowed from her mouth and stomach as she struggled to breathe, her face twisted in pain. Rangus rushed to her side, pleading for her to stop, telling her that she was seriously injured and couldn't continue. Zeke, still calm but serious, told Rangus to step back, warning that he wouldn't be responsible if Rangus got caught up in what was about to happen. His sharp eyes caught something unusual in Lika's energy. She already had traces of advancement, but now he sensed something stronger. He wondered if she had just reached 2-star. At that moment, Lika began to rise again. Her trembling body steadied as a bright white aura burst from within her, surrounding her in radiant energy. The students watching gasped in surprise and excitement. They shouted that it was unmistakable, the mark of a 2-star. The glowing white aura was proof that she had advanced. It was then explained that a 2-star represented the state where a person could emit source power outside their body for martial arts. The energy released in that form was known as an aura. Lika looked ahead with determination, thanking Zeke. It was because of their battle that she had reached the 2-star class. Now she believed there was no chance for him to win. With renewed strength, she charged toward Zeke with the speed of a leopard, her movements faster and sharper than before. Zeke smiled faintly, impressed, acknowledging her speed as he dodged her attack. But as he moved aside, a sudden sting appeared on his cheek. A clean cut. Shock filled his eyes as he realized he had dodged her strike, yet still got hit. Confusion flashed through his mind as he wondered what kind of power she had gained. Lika's body glowed with a powerful, energetic aura that rippled through the air. She raised her great sword, her eyes burning with the fire of victory, declaring that this was her ability. Now that she possessed a 2-star aura, she was ready to display the true form of the Thunder Greatsword technique. The determination in her gaze made it clear she was going to defeat Zeke no matter what. Zeke watched her with interest, resting his hand against his chin and smiling. His expression showed excitement rather than fear. He thought to himself that this was perfect. He would finally witness martial arts he had never encountered before. The thrill of battle filled him completely, and he murmured that now the real fun was about to begin. Then Lika launched a lightning great sword technique called Lightning Flash at Zeke, unleashing a yellow energetic aura, and Zeke narrowly evaded the attack while shouting in surprise at the unfamiliar power. Lika mocked the notion of manipulating lightning as absurd and accused him of seeming to be having a blast. Then she followed with an even more powerful lightning net attack that forced Zeke to leap away, while he admitted that the clash felt nothing like before, and that even for him the lightning would be difficult to handle now. Other students watching the fight reacted in stunned whispers, questioning what kind of battle this was and marveling that adding just 1 star could change things so drastically, while Rangus grew worried for Zeke. Zeke thought that the movements themselves were actually quite simple, and that nothing had changed from before, but the moment Lika had reached 2-star and gained an aura, the power of that lightning great sword technique had exploded. He recalled thinking that she had been fast before, but was even faster now, and more than anything, the lightning felt mysterious, the ability to clad oneself in lightning seeming impossible to him. He considered that he could counterattack right then, but curiosity about the true nature of that power held him back, and he smiled inwardly at the mystery. Lika smirked at his calmness, accused him of being relaxingly composed in such a situation, and vowed to wipe the smile from his face, slashing with her sword while Zeke stepped back and she followed. Up with a swift thunder attack as dangerous as a thunderbolt. Zeke compared it to a thunderbolt and failed to dodge, collapsing after being struck so hard that the wall shattered where he fell. Wounded badly, yet still wearing a smile, Lika unleashed a full-power lightning flash against him, which Zeke dodged with a smirk before delivering a kick that cracked the ground. Rangus, sprinting to Zeke's aid and trying to stop the relentless assault, pleaded with Lika to stop, but she demanded why she should, insisting that stopping would insult him since he was still standing. Panic-stricken, Rangus begged Lord Zeke to surrender, and Lika offered Zeke a chance to give up and serve under her, arguing that she would cease if he yielded. While Zeke smirked at the proposition, Lika derided him as a proud Eldragon, even as an illegitimate child, and decided to finish him with full force. Invoking lightning great sword technique, first secret art, Heaven's Thunder, Zeke could not evade the strike and cried out in pain as Rangus called desperately for him, and Zeke fell, knocked out and unconscious where he hit the ground. Lika nonchalantly acknowledged the match was over and turned to leave, but Zeke rose again, surprising everyone as lightning aura began to emanate from him. Lika, disbelieving, demanded how he had acquired a lightning aura, while Zeke coolly declared that this was what lightning aura looked like, crossing his arms and joking that he did not know how it had happened. He explained that he had deliberately absorbed Lika's attacks to analyze her power, and somehow he had become able to use it too, revealing that while receiving the mysterious lightning strikes he had kept, using his breathing technique, Dragon King's breath, which reacted with Lika's lightning aura, causing lightning to accumulate inside him until he could manipulate it himself. He admitted he did not understand the exact principle, but observed that while applying Dragon King's breath, lightning started to accumulate within him, and he eventually wielded it, wiping blood from his mouth with a smirk. Zeke suggested that Lika must possess a unique constitution, and wondered whether, since the greatsword technique was a family hereditary martial art, her entire clan might be endowed with such a constitution. He marveled that even the source power itself seemed to carry lightning properties, and deemed the training excellent, thanking Lika for helping him reach 2-star level as well. Lightning aura and thunderbolt. Energy crackled from his hand as he declared, the match far from over. Lika attacked again with a lighting slash which Zeke dodged, and he he realized that when source power was enhanced, it affected muscles and nerves, strengthening the body, marveling at the incredible unique constitution that enabled such effects. Zeke mockingly said he needed to get used to this new reality a bit, while Rangus, watching in awe, thought that a battle between next head candidates was unfolding and that she could barely keep up just by observing. Rangus wondered if she was imagining things as Lady Lika's lightning slashes ceased to land, and Lika snapped angrily at Zeke for mocking her. Zeke grinned and insisted he was not mocking at all, but instead truly considered her a threat, then kicked her sword and sent Lika tumbling back to the ground. Stretching with a laugh, Zeke judged that it was about the right time to end the fight and announced he would create a new technique, calling it a special form rather than a first form, drawing Lika's distracted thought that he must have recently acquired secret combat training and questioning from which family one could so easily invent techniques. Zeke berated her for being lost in thought during battle, warning that a fighter must never be distracted, which shocked Lika, and then he struck her chest powerfully with Dragon Destruction Combat Art's special form, Lightning Peak, knocking her unconscious to the ground. Zeke declared the match over and called it a truly interesting fight, while Lika groaned in pain, refusing to accept defeat and vowing to become head by defeating her older brothers, insisting she absolutely could not lose. Zeke praised her strength and watched Lika's shocked expression before offering his hand in friendship, extolling the joy of learning new things and calling their clash an extremely meaningful time that would be boring if it were only a one-time event, then suggested they spar again, inviting Lika to spar further together. A few hours later, Lika's dad, Balsa, was down in a dungeon absolutely bullying monsters for sport. He wasn't even trying, just using the first form of his dragon combat arts and still turning the place into a monster clearance sale, all while looking like he was out for a casual stroll. While Balsa was busy turning another wave of monsters into dungeon confetti, a messenger came sprinting in like he was late for a pizza delivery. He breathlessly announced that Lika had hit 2-star rank. Balsa barely blinked. The poor messenger, sweating hope and desperation, tried to hype it up, saying stuff like she could hit 5-star before graduation. But Balsa looked about as impressed as a man being told water is wet. But Balsa shut him down mid-sentence, saying talents just glitter. Looks nice but useless if it doesn't do anything. He told the messenger to come back when Lika actually did something with her shiny new power, not just leveled up her bragging rights. The messenger hesitates before adding that Lika just lost a fight. Balsa assumes she must have fought an upperclassman, but the man corrects him. The person who defeated her was his illegitimate son, Zeke. That name gets Balsa's attention. He remembers Zeke's mother, a woman with real talent, though she died before giving birth to him. This makes Balsa wonder how Zeke managed to develop enough skill to beat a 2-star like Lika. The messenger continues, saying what's most impressive is that Zeke reached 2-star all on his own, without any teacher or mentor. Upon hearing that, Balsa decides it's time to begin the first trial. The messenger is stunned, reminding Balsa that it's too early, but Balsa dismisses him. He declares that death comes for everyone, and only the strong deserve to survive. Anyone who can't pass the first trial is worthless and has no future. Before the messenger can protest further, Balsa gives another shocking order to summon Freya. The messenger, unsure if he heard correctly, asks again. Balsa confirms it. He wants Freya to oversee the trial herself, since Zeke seems like an interesting subject. The messenger reluctantly accepts the order and leaves. Once he's gone, Balsa finally allows a small grin to appear, clearly eager to see what Zeke is truly capable of. Later, at the academy training grounds, Zeke and the other students are practicing under their instructor's supervision. While everyone else is working on their dragon breath techniques, Zeke trains differently, lifting boulders 5 times his size while focusing on his breathing. To him, this technique is simple, something even kids should be able to grasp. Langus notices Zeke's unusual training and asks why he isn't joining the group. Zeke replies calmly that he's already learned the dragon combat arts, leaving Langus shocked. Langus argues that's impossible since they just started learning it, but Zeke decides to prove a point. He explains that Langus's ether flow is unstable, then drops the massive boulder from his head, taps Langus from behind, and transfers a bit of ether energy into him. Langus immediately feels the proper flow of energy and thanks Zeke, finally realizing that Zeke truly has mastered it. Zeke, however, looks annoyed that Langus doubted him. Langus quickly clarifies that that he meant no disrespect, explaining that he's never had anyone to teach him except his father. He admits that Zeke is already strong enough to have defeated Laika and assumes the dragon combat arts must feel too easy for him. But Zeke disagrees. He says it's actually a refined and impressive system. He explains that although people once mocked it for being too complex, it's a powerful art with multiple forms of combat. Zeke also mentions that his fight with Laika helped him develop a new form, the very technique he used to defeat her, and he's curious to see how the art has evolved over time. Having nothing new to learn from it, he decides to return to his physical training. Just then, Langus makes an unexpected request. He asks Zeke to train him. He admits that the path to strength is hard, but he's determined to follow it. To his surprise, Zeke agrees, saying Langus has the right attitude. Langus is overjoyed, but before he can say more, a familiar voice cuts in. Laika's. Shy but determined, she steps forward and asks Zeke to train her too. She admits he's stronger than she expected, and that losing to him shattered her pride. Now, she just wants to become stronger, strong enough to surpass her brothers, and even Zeke himself. Her sudden request catches Zeke off guard. He takes a moment to think, leaving Laika anxiously waiting for his answer. Since Zeke didn't respond right away, Leah asked if he was truly fine with the idea. Rangus, who was also a candidate to become the next head of the Laragan family, agreed with her. He realized that even though Zeke was an illegitimate child, Balsa El Ragan was still his father, which technically made Zeke one of the successors, whether he liked it or not. Zeke replied calmly that he didn't mind, but his concern was about Laika's condition. From what he had seen during their match, her injuries should have taken at least a month to heal. Laika shook her head, explaining that she had already used a healing potion and there was no need for him to worry. Zeke and Rangus exchanged a look, whispering to each other. Zeke wondered if the potion truly had such strong effects, but Rangus clarified that if Zeke meant the basic potion given during the entrance exam, it wouldn't have been enough to heal Laika's wounds that quickly. Because she was the daughter of the family head, she must have used a much stronger potion. Zeke sighed in amazement, muttering that this era truly was something else. Laika admitted that without the potion, she would have been bedridden for at least a month, but for now, what mattered was her request, whether Zeke would agree to train her as well. She knew he also needed to train, but she wanted to grow stronger under his guidance. Zeke agreed without hesitation, saying that he never turned down those who had ambition. Both Leah and Rangus were surprised by his response. Leah pointed out that he was just as young as them, while Rangus added that they were about the same age. Zeke chuckled, agreeing with them before teasingly asking if Laika was sure about wanting him as her instructor, since he was the one who had defeated her. Laika replied firmly through her resolve. She didn't care about losing. She didn't have the luxury to be picky if she wanted to become the next head of the Laragan family. Strength was the only thing that mattered. Zeke remembered their first encounter when she had spoken about her dream of becoming family head. He asked why she seemed so determined to achieve that goal. Laika answered without hesitation that if she failed, she would be used for a political marriage. She spoke bitterly, saying that in the best case she would probably be forced to marry one of her cousins, and in the worst case, a man she didn't even know. Zeke's expression darkened, anger flickering in his eyes as he asked what she meant. Laika explained that it was natural considering how valuable the Laragan bloodline was, especially among the 4 branches of the family. Their source power was special and could be used in countless ways. That was why the family was obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure. Rangus shuddered as a terrifying aura radiated from Zeke. His voice turned cold and sharp as he declared that the Laragan family had truly begun to do disgusting things. He clenched his fists and swore that he would destroy such meaningless traditions. Before the atmosphere could grow heavier, several instructors arrived, drawing everyone's attention. Laika blinked in surprise, wondering why they had come, while Zeke muttered that the timing couldn't be worse. He worried that they might have overheard what he just said. From behind them, a woman with fiery red hair appeared. One of the instructors stepped forward and announced that starting that day, they would have a new instructor. Despite her busy schedule, she had taken the time to teach them personally, and they should be grateful. As the red-haired woman approached, she reached out her hand toward Laika, asking if she was Lady Leah. Feeling danger, Leah instinctively leaped back. Zeke stepped forward protectively, while Rangus grabbed his arm in fear. The woman smiled faintly, praising Laika's sharp reaction and noting that her aura quality wasn't bad at all. Zeke frowned slightly. He hadn't even sensed her presence until now. Rangus nervously asked who she was. The instructor introduced her as Lady Freya Fwinkick of the Black Dragon Corps. Freya gave a polite smile and greeted everyone, saying she was pleased to meet them all. Then she looked straight at Zeke and asked if he was was Lord Zeke. When he confirmed, she asked if he wasn't surprised by her sudden appearance. Zeke replied calmly that nothing she did was surprising. Freya froze for a moment as Zeke's eyes began to glow faintly. He remarked that her stealth technique was rather interesting. Freya quickly realized why even the family head, Ba Laragan, was interested in this boy. As Zeke observed her, he noticed her source power was concentrated in her lower body, following a unique flow pattern that made her footsteps completely silent. A spark of excitement lit up his eyes as he wondered what kind of martial art she used. Freya then took command of the class, confirming that she would be their new instructor. The students began whispering among themselves in disbelief. Lady Freya, the Tempest Wind, was one of the strongest warriors in the family. The other instructor confirmed that she was a 6-star practitioner under the Black Dragon Corps, the elite unit serving directly under the family head. The students were in awe, unable to understand why someone of her rank would come to teach at their academy. Freya smiled faintly and said she would indeed train them, but under one condition. They had to pass a simple test. The students gasped, but Freya assured them it was simple. They just needed to bring back a crystal like the one she was holding and survive for 1 full month inside the Poison Dragon Mountain. Rangus went pale at the name, while Zeke felt a sense of nostalgia. The Poison Dragon Mountain was home to countless poisonous creatures, where even brushing against a leaf could kill an ordinary person instantly. It was a region of pure danger. Zeke recalled how in his previous life he had used that place as his personal training ground. Still, he thought this test might be too cruel for young students. Freya continued explaining the rules. Each student would receive 1 crystal orb. If their orb broke or was lost, they would immediately be disqualified. When someone nervously asked what would happen to those disqualified, Freya bluntly replied that they would be expelled from the dragon's nest. She added that they didn't need to worry about the poison itself. If they properly used the dragon's breath-breathing technique, they would be fine. As long as they maintained their breathing and kept their orbs safe, they could survive. Leah pointed out that aside from poisonous plants, there were also monsters. Freya's eyes turned sharp as she said they would have to defeat those monsters themselves, since hunting was the only way to secure food. Without it, they wouldn't last a few days. The students were horrified. Breton muttered that it was impossible. Many doubted whether their basic combat technique, the strike dragon, could even hurt the creatures living there. Freya smirked and told them not to panic. They had 5 days to prepare. During that time, they could each choose a basic weapon art from the Laragan family archives to learn. Mastering it would improve their survival chances. If they failed to learn it within 5 days, she would not take responsibility for what happened. When one student asked timidly if Freya would help them in case things got too dangerous, she chuckled darkly, saying that in the dragon's nest, only the strong survived. Those who couldn't defeat a few monsters might as well sleep peacefully beside them in the bed of poison. The students trembled in fear. Rangus was on the verge of tears, while Laika stayed silent in deep thought. Zeke frowned, wondering if this was still the same Laragan family he once knew. It felt completely different from when he had been family head. Freya ended the announcement and began distributing martial arts books for every weapon type, telling them to pick whichever technique they wanted to learn. As the students crowded around, Rangus hesitated, unsure what to choose. Zeke advised him to take a spear technique since he had used a spear during the entrance exam. Rangus agreed and thanked him. Laika said she would pick a great sword technique since she already knew the lightning greatsword's basic forms, but Zeke stopped her and suggested she try axe arts instead. When she asked why, Zeke explained that it would help cover her current weaknesses. Since it was Zeke who suggested it, she quietly agreed and trusted his words. Freya asked if everyone had chosen their books. When they confirmed, she told them to make good use of the remaining 5 days, as their survival depended entirely on mastering those techniques. If they failed, they would die pathetically in the Poison Dragon Mountain. Just as she was about to leave, Freya turned back and warned them that their seniors would be trying to steal their crystal orbs during the test. Rangus was stunned, asking what she meant. Freya explained that their senior group, 10 years older, would take the same test, but their task was to hunt down and steal the orbs from the younger batch. She added that the younger students outnumbered the seniors, and since the mountain was vast, they might get lucky and avoid confrontation. Still, the seniors would use every method to track and attack them. After saying that, Freya turned and left. Rangus looked terrified, sweating as he asked what they were supposed to do now. Not only did they have to deal with poisonous monsters, but also upperclassmen hunting them. Laika frowned, realizing that every upperclassman was at least 1 star level higher. If they ganged up on her, she wouldn't last long, and most of their classmates wouldn't survive either. Zeke agreed and advised her to form form a small group of 2 or 3. Since cooperation wasn't forbidden, they could help each other hunt and defend against seniors. When Rangus asked about Zeke's plan, he said he intended to go solo and enjoy the exam. Laika sighed, admitting that it sounded just like him. Before beginning their training, Zeke suggested they eat first. As they walked away, Laika glanced at Rangus and asked if he thought Zeke was a little strange sometimes. Rangus shrugged and replied that sometimes, yeah, he was. 5 days later, the students gathered before the Poison Dragon Mountain, their emotions a mix of fear and determination. Freya stood before them with a confident smile and declared that the weather was perfect for the test to begin. Lagnus was, as usual, a bundle of nerves. The mere thought of teaming up with someone as fierce and formidable as Laika had his stomach doing somersaults. I mean, come on! This girl was basically royalty, and here he was, a regular Joe with no noble blood running through his veins. Did he even belong in her elite circle? But just when he thought he'd crumble under the pressure, he overheard Celine, sweet, brave Celine, chiming in that she too was joining Laika's squad. And guess what? She was just a commoner like him. Then there was Raymond, another dude in the same boat, also lacking those fancy noble ties. Laika made it crystal clear that titles were as irrelevant as yesterday's leftovers. What she cared about was raw talent, and boy, had she picked a trio with some serious potential. Feeling a surge of confidence from her unwavering belief in them, Lagnus swore he'd give it his all. Celine and Raymond nodded in agreement, pledging to rise to the occasion like champions ready for battle. Then there was Zeke, the lone wolf, who decided to go it alone. But even he had to admit that Laika's team was a force to be reckoned with. He could see the incredible skills and boundless promise radiating from each member, and he couldn't help but admire Laika's uncanny knack for spotting talent. With a lineup like that, Zeke assured Lagnus they had nothing to sweat about. What the hell could go wrong? Freya, the overseer of this chaos, watched the students make their choices with a mix of surprise and delight. It was wild to see so many decide to band together, especially since most were still figuring out how to wield their weapons without accidentally turning themselves into a walking disaster. Once everyone got their shiny crystal orbs, Freya laid down the law. They had to survive for a whole damn month while clutching onto those orbs like their lives depended on it. Anyone who managed that would pass. But then, in a twist that had everyone's jaws dropping, she revealed the kicker. The orbs were identical, which meant they could be snatched right out of their hands. Panic spread like wildfire as the students grasped what that meant. Not only did they have to fend off the terrifying dangers lurking in the mountains, but they also had to watch their backs from each other. Freya warned them that once they stepped into the fray, senior students would be on the hunt, turning their survival test into a brutal battleground. A wave of dread washed over the recruits, especially after hearing the seniors' taunts about them barely scraping by with 1 star. What the hell were they getting themselves into? After Freya delivered her final chilling words, she dramatically signaled for the test to kick off. The students, practically tripping over themselves in their haste, bolted toward the forest like a pack of wild animals. And just before vanishing into the tangled maze of trees, Laika shot a glance back at Zeke, a silent, urgent prayer for each other's safety. Zeke, however, remained behind, as cool as a cucumber, casually watching his peers disappear into the depths of the wilderness. When Freya inquired if he wasn't going to join the chaos, he simply shrugged, saying he didn't feel that same jittery rush that had gripped the others. What the hell was up with that? Once the clearing fell silent, the head instructor couldn't help but voice his concerns about the exam's sheer insanity. I mean, come on! These students barely knew the basics and had the combat experience of a houseplant. But Freya, with her unwavering confidence, just smirked. Sure, the monsters lurking on the mountain were numerous, but weak. Like, seriously, she trusted that teamwork would be their saving grace. Yet, she casually dropped a bombshell about something peculiar she planned to unleash into the forest later, leaving the instructor's jaw practically on the floor. But she just brushed it off like it was no big deal. When the moment of truth arrived, Freya commanded the senior students to spring into action. They dashed off, practically bursting with excitement, ready to ambush the unsuspecting newcomers. Watching them scamper away, Freya couldn't help but grin to herself. Her curiosity piqued. How many of these kids would actually make it through this? Twisted Gauntlet alive? Deep within the shadowy depths of the forest, one group of seniors soon spotted a lone figure, Zeke. They figured he'd be an easy target, just standing there like a deer in headlights, and attacked without a second thought. But before that arrow could even whisper past him, Zeke caught it like it was a damn frisbee. His laughter rang through the woods, sharp and unnerving as he taunted them, claiming he'd been waiting for this moment. The seniors froze, their faces turning ghostly pale, realizing realizing way too late that they were not the hunters, they were the prey. Zeke charged forward. His smile twisted into something straight out of a nightmare. And the game was officially on. Deep within Poison Dragon Mountain, Lika and her group were locked in a fierce battle against the mountain's monstrous creatures. After Celine skillfully brought down a massive frog-like beast, another one lunged from behind her. But before it could strike, Raymond stepped forward, shield raised high, blocking the ambush and saving her in time. With a brutal counter, he slammed the creature to the ground and drove his shield through its body, ending its life instantly. Nearby, Rangus was locked in combat with another monster, taking it down with surprising ease. Raymond looked over, satisfied by their coordination, and Lika praised their teamwork. Rangus blushed at the compliment, but froze in disbelief when he saw the mountain of corpses Lika had already piled up on her own. Celine couldn't help but admit that Lika's strength was beyond comparison, exactly as they had expected. Raymond nodded, adding that while they were struggling with a handful of monsters, Lika had already wiped out nearly all of them herself. Lika simply shrugged, saying it was natural. As a two-star warrior, these creatures were nothing more than a warm-up to her. She added that everyone had shown huge improvement since the exam began a week ago, especially Celine and Raymond, who had both reached one-star level. Celine thanked her sincerely, admitting they wouldn't have advanced so quickly without her help, and Raymond agreed. Rangus, however, stayed silent, staring at the ground, feeling how far behind he'd fallen. Now that both his friends had already awakened their first stars, Celine noticed the look on his face and gently reassured him that he'd get there soon too. Raymond nodded, telling him to be patient and keep working hard. Their encouragement brought a faint smile to Rangus's face. Lika then pointed out that Rangus had already defeated 3 giant frog monsters without having a star, which was no small feat. She reminded him that before the exam, he had personally trained with Zeke and perfected his spear handling, so it was only a matter of time before he awakened his own star. Touched by her words, Rangus felt a lump in his throat, struggling to hold back tears. As Lika glanced toward the sky, she noticed the sun dipping behind the peaks. Night was approaching fast. She told everyone it was time to return to base. Celine agreed immediately, warning that Poison Dragon Mountain became even more dangerous after dark. While heading back, Lika suddenly stopped mid-step. Rangus, alert, asked what was wrong, but she didn't respond. Her expression turned cold as her eyes narrowed toward the distance. Moments later, a figure emerged from the tall grass near their base. The others froze, weapons drawn. The mysterious figure stepped out with a cocky grin, weapon resting loosely at his side. Lika instantly recognized him as an upperclassman and asked if he was here to steal their crystal. The man confirmed it with a smirk, saying the current exam required upperclassmen to take crystals from first years, though he hadn't expected his first target to be Lady Lika's group. Lika warned him that he was making a mistake, saying one upperclassman stood no chance against her team. But the grin on his face only grew wider as he replied darkly, "Who said I was alone?" From the grass behind him stepped out 3 more upperclassmen, each radiating 1-star energy. Their leader sneered, saying even Lika would struggle now since her teammates were nothing but dead weight. Drawing his sword, he demanded they surrender their crystal orbs. Without hesitation, he lunged at Lika, but she easily sidestepped the strike and ordered her teammates to hold formation while she dealt with him. The battle erupted instantly. Rangus, still starless, struggled desperately to defend himself. His opponent mocked him, telling him to give up and hand over his crystal. Rangus faltered for a moment, unsure what to do, until a memory flashed through his mind, a conversation with Zeke. He had once asked Zeke how someone weaker could possibly defeat stronger enemies. Zeke's reply had been blunt. "Then you should surrender." Rangus had been stunned at the answer, but Zeke clarified. If the enemy was far beyond reach, a 3-star or higher, surrendering was the only logical choice. But if the opponent was closer in strength, maybe 1-star, there was still hope. When Rangus had asked how, Zeke's words were simple. "You just have to exploit an opening." Rangus had been confused, and Zeke continued, "Exactly. Wait for an opening. You can't force one. Endure until they slip. That's your chance." He had explained that against stronger opponents, especially special ones like Lika, survival was impossible. But against an average 2-star, it could be done with patience, endurance, and confidence in his own ability. His final advice had been clear. Don't overthink it. Just wait. When you see the opening, strike with everything you have. Now, as blows rained down on him, Rangus gritted his teeth, Zeke's voice echoing in his mind. He focused on surviving, dodging, blocking, and waiting. His opponent grew increasingly frustrated, shouting for him to just fall already. And then it happened. A brief moment, a single flaw in the enemy's guard. Without hesitation, Rangus drove his spear forward with all the strength he had left. The weapon pierced through his opponent's chest, dropping him instantly. The man collapsed, unconscious, and a bright light flared from Rangus's chest, the mark of his first star awakening. Lika noticed immediately, eyes widening in surprise and pride. Rangus had done it. He'd taken down his opponent and awakened his power. Meanwhile, Lika's own duel raged on. Her opponent, a 2-star like her, couldn't comprehend how she was overpowering him so easily. Leica realized that since mastering the axe arts technique Zeke had taught her, her strikes had become sharper, her energy denser, and her power overwhelming. She told the man it was simply his bad luck to challenge her team. Golden lightning surged across her greatsword as she raised it high. "This battle ends here," she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. With one devastating slash, she struck him down, the shockwaves scattering debris around them. As the dust settled, the enemies lay unconscious. Leica rushed back to check her team. Once she confirmed everyone was safe, a wave of relief spread through the group. They had just claimed their first victory against upperclassmen. Celine and Raymond congratulated Rangus on his newly awakened star, and he smiled brightly, thanking them. Leica looked at them all, pride gleaming in her eyes. Her entire team had finally reached 1-star level. With newfound confidence, she said their future battles would be much easier from now on. Then, with a thoughtful look, she wondered how Zeke was doing. Elsewhere in Poison Dragon Mountain, an upperclassman sprinted through the darkness, face pale and soaked with sweat. His breath came in ragged gasps as he mumbled in panic. "Please, don't come here, Zeke! Don't come here!" His voice trembled, tears streaming down his face as he cursed under his breath, terrified beyond reason. Whatever he had seen, whatever Zeke had become, it wasn't human. Moments later, more upperclassmen came running through the forest, shouting for help, praying to survive whatever monster Zeke truly was. As Zeke dragged the beaten upperclassman across the ground, the others cursed under their breath, terrified and confused about what kind of monster he was. With the corpse of a massive snake beast dangling casually from one hand, Zeke grinned and asked mockingly what their problem was, wondering if no one else wanted to play with him anymore. The upperclassmen called him insane as they ran for their lives, panicking over how the situation had flipped so completely. The hunters had become the hunted. One of them tripped while fleeing and fell face first onto the dirt. He tried to get up, trembling, but froze when he realized Zeke was already standing in front of him. Those crimson eyes glowed faintly as Zeke sighed, saying he was getting tired of chasing him. He even stretched out a hand, calmly offering to help the guy up, only to add that once he did, they'd have to fight. The poor upperclassman's eyes went wide in pure horror, and then his body just gave up. He collapsed unconscious before Zeke could even touch him. Zeke tilted his head, genuinely confused, muttering to himself in disbelief. He looked around and wondered aloud what was wrong with everyone, why the mighty upperclassmen had suddenly become so timid. He called them pathetic, mocking how brave they'd acted earlier, only to now run like scared chickens. With a smirk, he shouted for the rest not to leave him behind, clearly enjoying every second of this twisted game. Just then, Zeke felt a faint presence nearby. Turning his head slightly, he called out to whoever was watching, asking if they wanted a better view, they could just come closer. When no one replied, he chuckled and said that since the hidden observer wasn't interfering, it must mean he wasn't doing anything wrong. With a playful grin, he announced he'd stop holding back and continue his little hunt. From the direction Zeke had been staring, a man stepped out from the shadows. It was one of the overseers observing the exam. Sweat rolled down his cheek as he whispered to himself, struggling to process what kind of creature this boy was. He had seen Zeke defeat upperclassmen who were supposed to completely outclass him, and worse, Zeke had sensed his presence despite all the concealment. Realizing how serious this was, the overseer knew he had to report everything immediately. Meanwhile, outside Poison Dragon Mountain, Freya sat at the camp when several observers arrived to give their reports. It had been a week since the exam began, and already 30% of the lower classmen had dropped out. The rest were barely adapting to the poisonous terrain and fierce beasts around them. One observer mentioned that the remaining students seemed to be managing now and probably wouldn't withdraw soon. When Freya asked about the upperclassmen, however, the observers exchanged nervous looks. Her expression hardened and she demanded they speak clearly. Finally, one of them confessed that the upperclassmen were constantly fleeing. Freya frowned, asking why they were running. There were no monsters strong enough in Poison Dragon Mountain to make them retreat. That's when one of the observers explained they weren't running from a beast. They were running from Lord Zeke. Freya blinked in surprise and asked why they would run from him of all people. Another observer took a deep breath and said that Zeke had been relentlessly hunting and attacking them. At first, they tried to fight back, but after losing repeatedly, they had no choice but to run. A second observer spoke up, his tone uneasy. He said Zeke seemed to be enjoying it, grinning while cutting them down one by one, as if it were all some grand game. To them, this wasn't training anymore. It was pure carnage. Even though Zeke was the son of the dragon family head, they said he was far from normal. He was something beyond, a true monster wearing human skin. Freya listened silently, then said in a calm but serious tone that she wasn't surprised. From the very beginning, she had sensed that Zeke was unusual. Unlike others, he chose to take the exam alone and had walked into Poison Dragon Mountain completely relaxed. That alone said everything. He hadn't planned to survive, he had planned to hunt. Remembering the cold glint in Zeke's eyes when they first met, Freya murmured that the boy truly was a monster. Just then, a low rumbling echoed in the distance. One of the observers frowned and asked what that strange sound was. Freya's lips curled into a faint smile. She said it was something she'd been waiting for. Moments later, a soldier approached, asking Lady Freya where to place the massive iron cage they had brought. She told them to leave it right there and thanked them for their effort. The observers turned to look and froze. Their eyes went wide as they saw the creature trapped inside. Some even stepped back, demanding to know if Freya was serious about releasing that thing inside the mountain. The aura alone was terrifying. It was clearly a 3-star beast, far too powerful for any student to face. But Freya only smiled, explaining that there was nothing to worry about. Adjustments had been made. The creature would only attack individuals with 2-star strength or higher. Ordinary students would be fine. When someone asked why such a dangerous beast was being added mid-exam, Freya calmly replied that it was a direct order from the dragon family head, Lord Balza himself. In her mind, however, she already knew the truth. She wanted to see Zeke's full power with her own eyes, to know whether the boy everyone called a monster could truly survive against something like that. With a sharp glint in her eyes, she ordered them to release the creature at dawn. The next morning, deep inside Poison Dragon Mountain, Rangus and his team were moving cautiously when the ground beneath them began to shake violently. Lika frowned, saying she had a really bad feeling about it. Raymond wondered if the upperclassmen had caused it somehow, but Rangus quickly dismissed the idea, saying it was probably a beast, maybe a massive anger boar. Still, Lika couldn't shake her unease, muttering that something about this tremor felt different. Then, without warning, the ground rumbled again, twice as strong. A towering tree cracked and began to fall toward them. Lika's instincts kicked in, and she yelled for everyone to move. The group leaped aside, just in time as the tree smashed, down where they had stood moments ago. When they turned around, Lika froze. Celine gasped, unable to believe what she was seeing. Rangus went pale, sweat dripping down his temples as his voice trembled. He said they had to run now, because standing before them wasn't just any beast, it was a colossal golem, towering like a mountain, with eyes glowing like molten lava. And from that moment, everyone knew the real test inside Poison Dragon Mountain had just begun. Zeke rested atop a mound of fallen monsters and defeated upperclassmen, his posture relaxed yet restless. The examination had lost its appeal. No challengers remained willing to step forward, and even the unseen exam observers had withdrawn their presence, leaving him free to act without restraint. What should have been a tense trial had instead become dull and unfulfilling. That boredom lingered until a sudden disturbance reached his senses from beyond the opposite side of Poison Dragon Mountain. The unfamiliar aura immediately caught his attention. At first, he assumed it belonged to a 2-star creature, but as he focused, the pressure of the presence revealed itself to be far greater. It was unmistakably 3-star. The realization unsettled him. Poison Dragon Mountain was not supposed to harbor creatures of that level. He briefly considered the possibility that the aura belonged to some ancient being that had lived hidden within the mountain for centuries. If such a monster truly existed, none of the examinees would stand a chance against it. Even Leica, among the strongest, would be unable to face it alone. The instructors should have ensured that no such threat remained before the exam began. Yet, after a moment of reflection, another possibility surfaced. Perhaps Freya and the other instructors had deliberately allowed the 3-star creature to remain as part of the examination itself. Their intentions were impossible to decipher. Regardless of the reason, Zeke found the situation exhilarating. At last, there was something worthy of his attention. Although the creature was far from his current location, he had no intention of waiting. If it would not come to him, then he would go to it. Elsewhere on Poison Dragon Mountain, a fierce battle was unfolding. Selene launched a full-force attack at the golem, blocking their path, but her strike failed to leave even the smallest mark on its hardened body. Raymond followed, slamming into the creature with his shield using all his strength, only to achieve the same futile result. Recognizing the disparity in power, Leica stepped forward and infused her attack with aura and lightning. This time, a shallow scratch appeared on the golem's arm. From that result, she immediately understood the situation. Only someone at the 2-star level could damage its outer shell. Their 1-star companions were completely incapable of injuring it. Rangus quickly sought guidance, and Leica took command. Her plan was clear once she drew the golem's attention. The others would seize the chance to escape. However, her companions refused to retreat and leave her behind. They understood their limitations, yet they insisted on fighting alongside her. She pointed out the faint scratch on the golem's arm as proof that even her strongest attacks barely harmed it, emphasizing that they would only hinder her in direct combat. Raymond acknowledged their inability to deal damage, but argued that they could still support her by ensuring her attacks landed cleanly. Rangus and Selene shared that resolve, determined to contribute in any way possible rather than stand aside. Their trust and determination moved Leica, and she accepted their support. As she gathered aura and lightning into her sword, the others prepared their roles. Raymond readied himself to defend, while Rangus and Selene positioned themselves to distract and assist. Once her power was fully concentrated, the group launched their renewed assault. Leica advanced first, immediately drawing the golem's counterattack. Raymond raised his shield to protect her, but the sheer power of the 3-star creature overwhelmed him, pushing his limits as a 1-star. Rangus and Selene rushed in, striking to divert the golem's attention. Using the opening they created, Leica circled behind the monster and unleashed her lightning greatsword technique, Heaven's Thunder. The blow detonated with immense force, shaking the forest of Poison Dragon Mountain. When the smoke finally cleared, the devastation to the surrounding area was undeniable. The golem lay collapsed, and Leica had exhausted every last bit of source power within her body. Rangus rushed to check on her condition, while she turned her attention to Raymond, who remained standing with Selene's support. Believing the battle over, Leica suggested returning to their base. At that moment, a chilling presence surged behind them. The golem moved again, reacting instantly. Leica shoved Rangus out of harm's way, leaving herself seized in the creature's grasp. Shock and disbelief washed over her as she realized her mistake. She had lowered her guard too soon. Selene was equally stunned. Even after taking Leica's full power strike, the golem was still alive. Rangus tried desperately to intervene, thrusting his spear at the monster, but the golem swung Leica's body violently, preventing any clean attack. As panic set in, a massive tree suddenly came flying through the air. It slammed into the golem with tremendous force, breaking its grip and freeing Leica. Rangus rushed to her side, helping her regain her footing and retreat from the monster. Still disoriented, Leica struggled to understand what had saved her. Before an answer could form, a familiar presence made itself known. Both she and Rangus immediately recognized it. Zeke had arrived. Instead of checking on her injuries, Zeke's attention was entirely consumed by the monster itself. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he took in the sight before him, utterly delighted by the unexpected encounter with a powerful clay puppet worthy of his interest. Moments before reaching the source of the disturbance he had sensed, Zeke noticed a flash of golden lightning cutting through the distance. He instantly recognized the aura as Lee's, and was stunned by the realization that her group had encountered the monster before anyone else. The timing was far from ideal. He pushed his body to its limits, sprinting without pause. That was when a sudden realization struck him. He came to an abrupt halt, memory aligning with instinct. Grabbing hold of a massive tree, he tore it free from the ground with raw strength, channeling both his physical power and newly learned technique. He hurled the enormous trunk toward the monster's location. As the tree soared through the air, he assessed the result and found it satisfactory. Learning that technique had not been a mistake, his current body demanded it. The method he used belonged to the nurturing dragon throwing arts. These techniques, much like the strike dragon combat arts, were part of the basic Eldrian manuals distributed before the exam. They contained no advanced combat skills, only fundamental movements and guidance on source power flow. Yet for Zeke, they were ideal. In his previous life, he had excelled as a long-range fighter while possessing a physique better suited for close combat. Still, he understood immediately that a single thrown tree would not be enough. Without hesitation, he resumed his charge toward Lee's location. By the time he arrived, Rangus was still struggling to believe Zeke had appeared at all. Their group had survived, but survival was not the real issue. The golem still stood as an overwhelming threat. Zeke's attention sharpened the moment the creature was identified. The name alone intrigued him. The monster was strange. Its presence was unmistakable, yet it carried no trace of life force. As the golem rose once more, it launched an attack directly at Zeke. Despite warnings of its danger, Zeke caught its massive fist with a single hand. The impact confirmed what he already suspected. The creature was incredibly tough. Its hardened body made it clear that aura would be necessary to break through its defenses over time. With a simple motion, he shoved the fist aside, already dismissing the idea of defeating it through conventional means as dull and uninspiring. To Leica and the others, his attitude bordered on recklessness. Their group had barely survived the battle, yet Zeke treated the golem as little more than an inconvenience. When the monster attacked again, its sheer size and power became even more evident. Still, Zeke did not retreat. He raised his arms and blocked the strike head-on, the collision sending shockwaves through the area. Even while defending, he recognized the danger of their surroundings. The battlefield was too unstable for the others to remain. At his signal, Lee's group withdrew without hesitation, retreating to a safe distance. Once they were clear, Zeke seized the moment. Gathering momentum, he grabbed the golem and hurled it away with overwhelming force. The creature's outer shell proved extraordinarily resilient, surviving even that. Unfazed, Zeke began channeling aura into his fist as he rushed forward. The durability of the exterior no longer interested him. What mattered was whether the inside was any different. Launching himself into the air, he prepared his answer. Activating the first form of the Dragon Destruction combat arts, Burst World, he struck the golem directly. The impact triggered a violent explosion that tore through the area. Rather than slowly wearing down the monster's defenses, Zeke had chosen a far more efficient method. By injecting source power directly into its body, he destroyed it from the inside out. The result confirmed his judgment. The technique worked exactly as intended, and the battle ended decisively. For Zeke, this approach transformed the fight into something genuinely enjoyable. 1 month later, Zeke found himself inside the main building of Eldrian State. Irritated by the sudden interruption to his training, the reason soon became clear. The 1-month examination at Poison Dragon Mountain had concluded successfully. Aside from the 3-star golem incident, no further major threats had occurred. The harsh environment had taken its toll. The number of 7-year-old class members had dropped to 30% due to the extreme conditions. However, those who remained had been pushed to the brink repeatedly. Constant exposure to danger and near-death situations had hardened them. As a result, the surviving 30% had achieved impressive progress, reaching the 1-star level by the end of the exam. Following the conclusion, Zeke was directly summoned by Baltza Eldrian, head of the Eldrian family. As they walked through the estate's corridors, it became clear that this meeting was not a formality. Freya, accompanying him, showed visible displeasure at Zeke's casual manner of addressing the family head. Formality mattered here, even if Zeke saw little difference in titles. The reason for the summons was no mystery to Freya. Zeke's conduct during the examination had guaranteed this outcome. His actions had gone far beyond expectations. The exam's purpose had been for upperclassmen to hunt lowerclassmen and steal their crystal orbs. Instead, Zeke, a lowerclassman, had done the unthinkable. He had targeted the upperclassmen themselves. Because of him, not a single upperclassman succeeded in stealing a crystal orb. While his actions had not violated any explicit rules, they shattered every assumption the instructors held. No one ever anticipated that a lowerclassman would possess both the strength and audacity to challenge those above him. Freya could only sigh at the situation. As she turned away, one thing was clear in her mind. Before Zeke could stand before the masterhead, his attitude would need to be addressed. Once again, Freya warned Zeke about his manner of speaking, emphasizing that his attitude needed to be corrected, especially when he was in front of the masterhead. She stressed that speaking carelessly to someone of that position could have serious consequences. Zeke showed little concern for her warning, prompting Freya to explain that his reckless behavior could eventually cost him his life. She feared that one day she might have to witness him being punished by execution at the hands of his own father, simply because of his conduct. Zeke, however, reacted indifferently, remarking that if such a thing were possible, then his father must be an extremely violent person. When they reached the door, Freya wasted no time and knocked immediately. She formally identified herself as Freya Wink of the Black Dragon Corps, and explained that they had come in response to the Masterhead's summons. After a brief moment, permission was granted for them to enter. Freya opened the door and led Zeke inside the room. As soon as they stepped in, she reported that she had brought Zeke as instructed. At that time, Balsa was still occupied with writing. He suddenly stopped and lifted his gaze toward Zeke, fixing him with a stern expression. Without hesitation, he questioned the reason behind Zeke's attack on the upperclassmen during the examination. Zeke remained quiet for a short moment, clearly tired of being confronted with the same accusation repeatedly. Instead of directly answering, he chose to question whether attacking the upperclassmen during the exam had actually been forbidden. When Balsa sought clarification, Zeke laid out his reasoning. He explained that the only conditions given for passing the test were to survive for 1 month on Poison Dragon Mountain and protect the crystal orb. He stated that he had never been informed of any additional restrictions. As far as he was concerned, as long as those conditions were met, participants were free to act however they wished during the examination. He further implied that if certain actions had been prohibited, those rules should have been made clear before the exam even began. Hearing this, Freya was overwhelmed by fear and panic. She reacted strongly, unable to believe the way Zeke was addressing the master head. At that exact moment, Balsa's eyes narrowed, and an overwhelming dragon aura erupted from him. The sheer pressure of it was so intense that Freya was forced to her knees, convinced that the master head's aura alone was powerful enough to kill Zeke. Contrary to her expectations, Zeke remained standing. The crushing pressure had no visible effect on him. Not only that, but he showed clear irritation, finding the attempt at intimidation increasingly bothersome. This unexpected reaction caused Balsa's expression to darken, a mix of shock and displeasure surfacing on his face. While Freya remained kneeling, Zeke questioned whether he had truly been summoned only to face such pointless questioning. Balsa then shifted the focus and asked how Zeke had accomplished what he did. Zeke did not immediately understand what was being asked. Balsa explained that reports claimed Zeke had not only defeated the upperclassmen, but had also taken down a 3-star golem. He further questioned how Zeke could stand calmly before him, even after being subjected to such intense pressure. Finally, Balsa demanded to know how a child born out of wedlock could possess such unfathomable strength. Zeke responded with casual confidence, stating that the reason for his power was simple. He attributed it solely to the fact that he was himself. This answer caused Balsa to frown deeply, frustration evident, while Zeke maintained his sharp gaze and unwavering stance. After a tense silence, Balsa acknowledged that Zeke's personality was indeed as terrible as the reports described. Nevertheless, he declared that Zeke would still be rewarded for defeating the golem. He presented 2 choices. Zeke could either take a single item from the dragon treasury or gain access to the 2nd floor of the dragon hall. Freya, listening silently, struggled to comprehend why Zeke was being rewarded at all after showing such blatant disrespect. In her understanding, both the dragon hall and the dragon treasury were sacred repositories built over more than 1,000 years. Beginning with the founding patriarch, Gilfa's dragon, the dragon hall housed countless books, including techniques that were now considered forbidden. The dragon treasury, on the other hand, contained relics left behind by former heads of the dragon family, legendary weapons, spirit medicines, artifacts, and rare items from many different eras. These places also safeguarded the family's most closely guarded secrets, which was why they were so heavily protected and accessible only to a select few who demonstrated extraordinary achievements. Freya found it impossible to believe that despite everything, Balsa still viewed Zeke as an exceptional child. Zeke then questioned why he was being forced to choose only one reward and suggested that receiving access to both should not be an issue. Balsa firmly denied this request, stating that only one choice was allowed and dismissed them, unwilling to accept that the conversation was already over. Zeke attempted to continue, which immediately alarmed Freya. She quickly grabbed him by the collar and pulled him away, emphasizing that receiving a reward directly from the master head was a tremendous honor. She stated that she now understood the master head's intentions and that they would be leaving. As she turned and dragged Zeke away, he declared that there was one final thing he wished to say. He stated that as long as Balsa continued to suppress his own emotions in the way he had been doing, he would never grow any stronger, regardless of his actions. Balsa was shaken by this statement and released his aura once more. However, to his shock, his dragon aura was suppressed by an even greater presence, the divine dragon aura emanating from Zeke. Freya trembled and desperately urged Zeke to remain quiet. After they exited the room, Balsa remained behind in silence, questioning what kind of existence Zeke truly was and what he had just sensed. Outside the main hall, Freya finally released her frustration. She questioned Zeke's behavior and demanded to know why he had been so disrespectful, reminding him of the warnings she had given beforehand. Zeke responded with genuine confusion, stating that he had done his best to restrain himself and behave appropriately. This only caused Freya to question whether his idea of restraint could truly be considered restraint at all. She wondered why he could speak respectfully to instructors, and even to her, yet treat the master head so differently. Zeke explained that the reason was simple. Balsa was his father, and therefore the way he addressed him was naturally different. Faced with Zeke's overwhelming abilities and unconventional mindset, Freya could only conclude that he was far from an ordinary child. She questioned who he truly was, Zeke reacted as though the question itself was absurd, once again stating that he was simply Zeke. Freya was left speechless. In her understanding, all of them had consumed ancient dragon blood as infants, binding them beneath the authority of the Masterhead, who possessed the power of the Dragon King, a superior being among ancient dragons. Even Zeke should not have been capable of opposing him. This realization only deepened her confusion about Zeke's true nature. When Freya fell silent, Zeke asked if something was wrong. She denied it outwardly, but inwardly resolved to investigate Zeke's birth records thoroughly. She then brought up the matter of his reward once more, reminding him that he could either enter the Dragon Hall up to the second floor or choose a single item from the Dragon Treasury. Only one option was allowed. Zeke once again asked if he could have both and was denied. Left with no alternative, he chose the Dragon Hall, valuing knowledge above material rewards. He reasoned that he lacked understanding of the current era and wanted to learn about the medicines, tools, and advancements developed over the past 1,000 years. At that moment, Rangus arrived, visibly astonished that they had been granted access to the Dragon Hall of the Dragon family. When Zeke asked about his reaction, Rangus confirmed his excitement. He believed that the combat arts he had already learned were incredible, and the chance to access even greater martial knowledge was beyond his expectations. He found it hard to believe that such rewards were granted simply for passing the exam. Soon after, Leica arrived, equally excited. She wondered how much knowledge she could absorb before the time limit expired, and resolved to read with everything she had. When Zeke asked about the duration of their stay, she explained that although they could only access the first floor, the rules were similar to the higher levels. Each person was allowed to borrow one book, but they could read as many others as they wanted as long as their time had not run out. Proper time management would be critical. Zeke acknowledged this calmly. Leica then mentioned hearing about Zeke's reward choice and expressed surprise that he had chosen the Dragon Hall over the Dragon Treasury. As she had expected the opposite, Zeke explained that while he had considered the treasury, knowledge was more important to him at this stage. Leica added that the second floor contained significantly rarer and more advanced books, particularly in martial arts, and that the gap in quality between floors was immense. Even so, she confidently believed that her lightning great sword technique remained unmatched. Zeke, however, seemed far more focused on the Dragon Hall itself, barely reacting to her words. This prompted her to question whether he was even listening. When they finally reached the Dragon Hall, the Guardian announced that they would be granted 5 hours inside. They were instructed to remain silent and use their time wisely. Zeke briefly wondered whether 5 hours was considered long or short. Leica reassured him that it was extremely generous compared to others who were only allowed 2 or 3 hours. She suggested that their first priority should be deciding which book to borrow, after which they should spend the remaining time reading as many others as possible. Rangus mentioned that he had heard of geniuses capable of reading multiple books at once, though his own goal was simply to find a martial arts technique that suited him before time ran out. As they stepped inside the Dragon Hall, Zeke remarked that finding suitable books to borrow would likely be difficult. Rangus and Celine were still in disbelief, overwhelmed by the reality of standing inside the legendary hall. Zeke, however, was struck by the sheer number of books before him, far exceeding his expectations. A rare smile appeared on his face as excitement surged within him, eager to discover whether the knowledge contained within might hold something capable of surprising even him. Not long after the protagonist finished selecting and reading several of the books that caught his interest, he experienced a shock so intense that it felt as though lightning had struck his mind. Surrounded by towering stacks of books piled in front of him and scattered at his sides, Zeke stared blankly, struggling to accept the information he had just uncovered. The concepts of rifts, chaos, and magic were far beyond anything he had anticipated. The sheer volume of unfamiliar knowledge overwhelmed his thoughts, making it impossible for him to process everything at once. Eventually, mental exhaustion forced him to collapse onto the floor beside the books he had already finished. As he lay there, he reflected on how terrifying the last 1,000 years truly were. More than anything else, he could not believe how drastically the world had changed in such a short span of time. The most unsettling revelation was that their world was no longer isolated. It was now connected to another realm through mysterious rifts. According to the records he had read, the first tear in the dimensional wall had appeared 900 years ago. Beyond that rupture lay a chaotic land that later became known as the Chaos Realm. Within it roamed monstrous beings called chaos creatures, existing freely without restraint. However, monsters were not the only inhabitants of that world. Humans also lived there. Individuals who wielded an extraordinary form of power known as source power, and who constantly fought against the chaos threatening their realm. When the Eldragon family learned of these people and their struggle, they formed an alliance with them to resist the chaos. Through countless battles and the bonds forged in war, 4 exceptionally powerful female warriors from the other world eventually married into the dragon family. These women, Tyona, Fafnir, Levias, and Bahamut, later became the founders of the 4 great Eldarin branch families that continued to exist in the present era. Zeke's thoughts gradually shifted from the past to his own experiences. His mind returned to the anger boar he had slain in the forest, the one shrouded in an unnatural black mist. He also recalled the lightning aura he had recently witnessed emanating from Lee. For the first time, he admitted to himself that he truly understood none of these phenomena. Both the strange black mist and Lee's lightning aura originated from the other world, far beyond the scope of his current knowledge. Among all these revelations, one subject captivated him more than anything else: magic. To Zeke, magic felt less like mysticism and more like a highly advanced form of technology introduced by beings from another world. Excitement sparkled in his eyes as he began searching for books related to magic, wondering where such volumes might be located. Given the usual organization, he expected them to be placed near the historical records. Yet no matter how thoroughly he searched, he could not find a single book that taught magic directly. Before he could dwell on this mystery further, a sudden warning echoed through the Dragon Hall, instructing him to remain silent. Startled, Zeke turned around and noticed a faint golden aura lingering in the darker regions of the hall. Immediately, confusion set in. He had clearly heard a voice, yet he sensed no presence nearby. This raised a new question. Had that truly been a voice, or was it a form of magic capable of transmitting sound without revealing its source? Looking up toward the ceiling of the Dragon Hall, Zeke confirmed that he could still sense nothing aside from the faint source power he had noticed earlier. Then, without warning, the books before him began to move. One by one, they lifted into the air. Shock coursed through him as he watched the impossible unfold. Yet that surprise quickly transformed into fascination when realization dawned on him. The books were being manipulated through threads of source power. His excitement surged at the discovery of such a technique. However, the same warning rang out once more. Urging silence, unable to contain himself, Zeke reached out and grabbed one of the floating books midair. Completely captivated by what he was witnessing, he demanded that the one behind this technique reveal themselves properly. Despite this, the cloaked figure seated on the upper floor of the Dragon Hall remained motionless and silent. In the next moment, those same source power threads were activated again. Zeke froze instantly as he realized his entire body had been bound. Before he could react, he was violently hurled down toward the first floor. Just as suddenly, he was thrown out through the doors of the Dragon Hall. His time inside declared over. Zeke tumbled across the ground outside before stabilizing himself and landing properly. Even as he recovered, his thoughts were consumed by the discovery he had just made, another phenomenon he could not yet comprehend. As he stood, he found himself uncertain whether he felt anger or exhilaration. The technique he had witnessed fascinated him deeply, and he longed to understand how source power threads were used in such a refined manner. Before he could pursue that thought any further, Rangus arrived, clearly confused by the scene before him. Shortly after, Leica followed, equally bewildered, wondering what Zeke could have done inside the Dragon Hall to be forcibly expelled. Zeke brushed it off simply, explaining that he had become overly excited. He then asked how their own time inside had gone, and whether they had found the books and techniques they were seeking. Rangus confirmed that his experience had been successful. He explained that he had borrowed a martial arts manual titled Cloudwater Spear Arts, and believed he had already grasped a few basic techniques from it. Selene also shared that she had learned some techniques, and had borrowed a sword manual called Windflower Sword Arts. Reynold added that he had studied the Dragon-style Guardian Sword Arts, and had chosen a book focused specifically on Guardian Shield Arts. Zeke greeted them awkwardly, concealing his inner shock. In his past life, every technique they mentioned had been something he had created casually, merely as personal experiments or pastimes. When he asked about Leica's choice, she responded enthusiastically, explaining that she had selected the Heavywave Great Sword Arts. This technique had originally been created by the first Dragon Patriarch, Gillis Elragan, and had since been revised and refined by the 15th family head. She also mentioned that her own family possessed hereditary martial arts, allowing her to use the book for research purposes. Zeke fell into silence once more. He reflected on how yet another one of his techniques had been revised by the 15th family head. Just like his dragon's breath and strike dragon combat arts, he recalled seeing numerous books in the Dragon Hall that were related to techniques he had once created, most of them now accompanied by improved versions placed neatly beside the originals. The more he thought about it, the more intriguing the 15th family head became. As Zeke glanced back at the Dragon Hall, he realized how wrong his initial expectations had been. He had assumed that the experience would quickly become dull. Instead, he now found himself eagerly anticipating the next opportunity to return. 5 years later, Lee walked quietly through a hallway before suddenly stopping. She wondered where Zeke and Rangus had gone. At that moment, several classmates appeared and greeted her respectfully, informing her that Lord Zeke and the others were currently at the training grounds, engaged in practice. Muttering to herself, Lee Typhona thanked them and continued on her way. Now 12 years old, she soon arrived at the training grounds. There she immediately spotted Rangus, Reeld and Selene, all preparing to launch an attack toward the protagonist, Zeke, who was also 12 years old by that time. At the same time, within Balsa's office, a report arrived concerning the emergence of a special rift. After questioning the reliability of the information, Balsa received immediate confirmation. The report had been delivered by Ain, the captain of the Black Dragon Corps. According to the results of their investigation, there was an estimated 80% probability that water-based magic existed within the newly discovered rift. Balsa reacted with visible concern. The location where the rift had appeared was exceptionally problematic, and he questioned why, out of every place within their territory, it had manifested in such a troublesome region. Despite his misgivings, the rift could not be ignored. The possibility that it contained magic water was simply too important. Balsa reflected on the nature of magic water. Anyone who consumed it gained a special constitution that allowed them to convert source power into an entirely different force, known as mana, effectively turning them into a mage. The introduction of mana-based magic had drastically altered the world, creating new techniques while also igniting fierce territorial conflicts over the sources of magic water, known as magic springs. In the current age, the number of mages directly determined a noble house's military strength. Unfortunately for Eldrian, not a single magic spring existed within its territory. For the Eldragon family, which possessed no natural access to magic water, there was only one method of obtaining it: conquering special rifts. Even now, the number of Eldrian mages remained extremely low, including Balsa himself. All of them were seasoned veterans who had acquired magic water through dangerous special rift conquests. Despite this, they were still vastly outnumbered by rival houses that controlled magic springs. Because of this imbalance, conquering special rifts had become Eldrian's highest priority. However, as Ain had reported, the location of the rift posed a serious problem. The abundant dragon forest, where it had appeared, was notoriously difficult to manage. A minor border conflict had already occurred in the surrounding region just days earlier. The forest itself was a massive woodland that lay mostly within dragon territory, but portions of it extended into the lands of another house. Those who claimed broader ownership of the forest and referred to it as the Great Abundant Forest were the Kerberos family. Ain pointed out that while the rift itself was clearly within Eldrian lands, the special domain formed around it could easily spread into Kerberos territory due to its scale and placement. Given the nature of that family, it was highly likely they would swarm toward the rift the moment they detected it. Balsa acknowledged that the Kerberos family's instincts were sharp, and that they would inevitably sense the rift's presence. As a result, the Eldragon family needed to prepare for an inevitable confrontation. Because it was a special rift, both sides would be limited in how they could act, but speed would be crucial. Action had to be taken before the Kerberos family fully mobilized. With his decision made, Balsa immediately instructed Ain to notify all dragon nests at once. He also declared that a selection exam would be held as soon as possible. Meanwhile, at the training grounds, Laker observed that Rangus and the others never held back when training against Zeke. In contrast to their intensity, Zeke remained composed, calmly waiting for their attacks. When the three launched a coordinated assault from different directions, Zeke's expression hardened as he reinforced his body and accepted all of their strikes at once. Rangus's spear struck Zeke with such force that its sharp tip pressed into his cheek. Despite this, Zeke calmly evaluated their teamwork, noting that their coordination was solid. However, he pointed out that Rangus was applying excessive force, which undermined the true effectiveness of spear techniques. At the time, Rangus was 11 years old. Zeke then turned his attention to Celine, who was 12. He observed that she relied too heavily on speed and the sheer number of strikes, sacrificing weight and impact in the process. According to him, she needed to find a better balance. As for Raymond, also 12, Zeke acknowledged that his movements and shield usage were correct and well-structured. Even so, Zeke concluded that all of them were still far too passive and needed to grow more accustomed to attacking with intent. Once again, he urged them to attack him. As Rangus charged forward yet again, Leica commented that witnessing their training was still completely unbelievable. From her perspective, Zeke allowing himself to be struck directly, without even using source power to defend himself, was pure madness. Zeke, however, treated it as nothing more than proper training. He demonstrated the results of his conditioning by flexing his muscles beneath his shirt, emphasizing that his body had become exceptionally resilient even without the aid of source power. Leica complained that Zeke should at least have the others stop attacking while they were talking. However, at that very moment, Rangus delivered a powerful spear strike from behind. He emphasized that this attack would demonstrate just how abnormal Zeke's physical defense truly was. Leica could only shut her eyes and clutch her head, concluding that every one of them was abnormal. Zeke refused to use any defensive techniques, while Rangus and the others continued attacking him with full force. Raymond then wondered how Zeke could possess such extraordinary defense without relying on source power at all. Celine added that it was far too mysterious to be explained by a normal human body. Leica immediately rejected the idea of comparing Zeke to humans, stating that he was nothing like them. She then revealed that seniors had given Zeke a particular nickname. He was known as the Demon Child of the Eastern Hall. At that moment, Lee arrived to observe them and considered joining the training. While she was willing to train, her arrival prompted Zeke to question the nature of the title that had just been mentioned and whether it was meant as an insult. He also asked whether Leica had come with something specific to say. Leica then explained that it seemed they would soon encounter children from other dragon nests. Far sooner than expected, Rangus reacted with visible shock, while Raymond remarked that he had anticipated such a meeting eventually, though not so soon. To him, it felt like the moment they would finally meet those rivals had arrived. When Celine questioned whether this was related to an upcoming test, Lee admitted that even she did not know the details. Zeke then asked how Lee had learned about such information. She explained that she had simply observed the instructors, their conversations, movements, and behavior. Zeke admitted that he had never paid attention to such things. Unlike Lee, who was known for closely following rumors and subtle signs, Leica responded that regardless of how the information was obtained, they needed to remain cautious. The West Hall possessed a particular individual they needed to watch out for, one of the candidates for the next head position, alongside herself and Zeke. Zeke reacted with interest, finding the situation more entertaining than concerning. A few days later, the students of the East Dragon's Nest gathered in the arena. Among them were several students who were being introduced for the first time. Zeke noticed that everyone had been assembled together, without any separation by grade. Leica confirmed his observation and reminded him that, just as she had predicted, they would soon be meeting students from other dragon nests. Before long, the arena fell silent as Freya arrived. She immediately brought the students to order. Once they were lined up before her, Freya announced that in 3 days' time, they would be fighting against the children of the other dragon nests. Once again, Freya made a major announcement. 3 days later, the students would face opponents from the other dragon nests, commonly referred to as the Dragon Halls. The moment her words settled, unease spread through the crowd. Many students were stunned by the news, as confrontations between different Dragon Halls were traditionally reserved for graduation-level trials. The sudden timing left them confused and speculating about the true purpose behind such an event. Freya acknowledged their doubts, explaining that there were multiple reasons for organizing these matches, though she made it clear that the details could not yet be revealed. Before concluding, she added one final piece of information that instantly ignited excitement throughout the hall. Those who emerged victorious would be granted a special mission. Upon hearing this, Zeke's interest was immediately piqued. He began to wonder what kind of opportunity could justify such a competition, and the situation quickly became more intriguing in his mind. Freya then clarified the structure of the matches. They would follow an elimination format, with 7 representatives chosen from each of the 4 halls: East, West, South, and North. The responsibility of selecting these participants would fall entirely on the students themselves, and the decision had to be finalized by the end of the day. An upperclassman questioned whether the 7 fighters would be chosen exclusively from senior students. Rather than answering directly, Freya pointed out that every student in the hall had been gathered for a reason. She then confirmed that participants would be selected from all grades. This revelation visibly shocked several upperclassmen, who immediately began doubting the usefulness of involving lowerclassmen. In their view, the younger students were far too weak to compete against fighters from other dragon halls, let alone stand on equal footing with upperclassmen. Unbothered by their reactions, Freya bluntly stated that she did not care how the selection was handled, and instructed them to resolve everything among themselves before leaving. As soon as she departed, tension erupted. Rick, an upperclassman, forcefully took control of the discussion and declared that the 7 representatives would come solely from the upperclassmen. He challenged the lowerclassmen to oppose his decision if they dared. Lee immediately objected, arguing that lowerclassmen had just as much right to participate. She insisted that excluding them outright was unreasonable. Rick responded with clear disdain, dismissing her stance as a misunderstanding. From his perspective, the only factor that mattered was combat ability. He further implied that bloodline prestige held no value in a true contest of strength. In response, Leica stepped forward, releasing her aura without restraint. As her 3-star level became evident, the atmosphere shifted instantly. She questioned whether ability was truly the basis of Rick's argument. The upperclassmen were visibly shaken, as many had believed rumors claiming she had only reached 2 stars. The revelation left them struggling to comprehend how quickly she had advanced. Leica calmly agreed that strength and capability should determine who fought for the dragon nest. She then challenged Rick directly by asking whether there were even 7 upperclassmen stronger than her. If not, she argued, then excluding lower-class men made no sense. Rick, now clearly irritated, struggled to respond. He eventually claimed that Leica's strength was merely a result of her exceptional bloodline. Still, he stubbornly maintained that aside from her, no lower-class man stood a chance against the upperclassmen, openly belittling them as worthless. At that point, Zeke intervened, cutting through the tension by criticizing Rick's behavior. This only fueled Rick's anger, prompting him to focus his hostility on Zeke. Unfazed, Zeke repeated his criticism without hesitation, further escalating the situation. Zeke then questioned whether the upperclassmen truly believed all lowerclassmen were weak and insignificant. As his expression hardened, his aura surged forward, silencing the room. He proposed a drastic solution, allowing everyone to fight freely until only 7 students remained. Lee immediately reacted in disbelief, overwhelmed by the extremity of the suggestion and labeling it dangerously excessive. Sensing the need for a more practical approach, Leica stepped in to clarify her own idea instead. She proposed holding preliminary matches open to anyone who wished to participate, regardless of grade. Those who proved themselves would earn the right to fight in the official matches 3 days later. She invited the upperclassmen to consider this option, pointing out that true confidence in their abilities should leave them with nothing to fear. Rick ultimately agreed to the proposal, though he clearly believed it would amount to nothing more than wasted time that could be better spent training. As the upperclassmen dispersed, Rick cast a final glance back at Lee and Zeke before leaving. Afterward, Lee turned her attention to Zeke, asking whether he intended to take part in the preliminaries. Zeke confirmed without hesitation. He went further, insisting that Rangi's, Selena, and Raymond should participate as well. The 3 were taken aback, and Rangi's quickly questioned whether Zeke was serious about having them challenge the upperclassmen. Zeke reaffirmed his decision firmly. He reminded them that they had trained together for a long time, and if they could not demonstrate their growth now, there would never be a better opportunity. Selena admitted that the pressure of facing upperclassmen was overwhelming. Raymond, on the other hand, accepted the situation calmly, stating that since Zeke had already made up his mind, all they could do was give their absolute best. Leica then remarked that it seemed she would once again be fighting alongside her teammates. She turned to the other lowerclassmen and invited anyone else who wished to join the preliminaries to step forward. However, most of them hesitated, whispering anxiously among themselves and admitting that they saw no chance of victory, especially against 3-star upperclassmen. Hearing this, Zeke let out a quiet sigh and questioned their lack of determination. He reminded them that growth came from challenging stronger opponents, and expressed his desire to witness the true abilities of their upperclassmen firsthand. The moment the upperclassmen drew their weapons, they began murmuring among themselves with clear irritation. To them, the selfish attitude of lower-classmen had become unbearable. No matter how desperately those beneath them struggled, victory was impossible. At least that was what they believed. Rangis and the others instinctively regrouped, their bodies stiff with anxiety as they faced opponents who clearly outclassed them in rank. The upperclassmen looked down on them with open mockery, treating the fight as nothing more than a chore. In their eyes, aside from Lady Leica, the lower-classmen were barely more than children stuck at the 2-star level. Zeke quickly noticed the tension hanging over his teammates. Their expressions were heavy, their confidence shaken. When he pressed them about it, Rangis admitted the truth. Every opponent they faced was a 3-star upperclassman, and fear felt unavoidable. Zeke reminded them of the past 5 years they had spent training together. They had endured everything, refined their skills, and grown stronger. What they lacked now was belief in themselves. His words took effect immediately. Celine and Raymond steadied themselves, visibly encouraged. Rangis, however, still struggled to completely suppress the nervousness rising in his chest. Before the atmosphere could settle, one of the upperclassmen grew impatient. The chatter annoyed him, and he made it clear that upperclassmen had no intention of wasting time on those beneath them. The fight needed to start, and the lower-classmen needed to be shown their place. What followed left everyone stunned. In less than a minute, the battle was already over. Spectators stared in disbelief, struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. The upperclassmen had fallen far too easily. Some wondered if this year's upperclassmen were unusually weak. Others quickly rejected that idea, concluding that the lower-classmen they had faced were simply abnormal. Zeke watched it all with a broad smile. Clearly satisfied, he praised Rangis and the others without hesitation. Rangis' ability to deflect attacks and identify openings had sharpened significantly. Celine handled the multi-strike windflower sword arts with impressive control. Raymond's seamless transitions between shield techniques and swordsmanship stood out as well. Every one of them had demonstrated clear results from their training. Zeke believed that continued exposure to real combat would only accelerate their growth. Lee had also improved drastically. With her lightning aura, she possessed the power to overwhelm opponents in a single strike. While the defeated upperclassmen struggled to process the speed and intensity of what they had just experienced, Leica calmly noted that decisive victory was the proper response to arrogance. Not everyone accepted the outcome. Rick refused to acknowledge what had happened. In his mind, it was impossible for 3-star upperclassmen to lose to 2-star lowerclassmen. Zeke confronted him directly, pointing out the foolishness of denying reality, even after witnessing it firsthand. Rank and age, he explained, were nothing more than indicators. In real combat, the only thing that mattered was who remained standing. Rick exploded in anger, clinging to the belief that star levels equaled absolute power. Zeke remained calm, stating that regardless of stars, destruction of the heart meant death all the same. Strength, in the end, was defined by victory alone. The argument only fueled Rick's rage. He dismissed Zeke as an ignorant brat, insisting that mercy had been the only reason the lower-classmen had survived. Now he claimed there would be no restraint. Zeke showed no interest in continuing the exchange. Words were meaningless, action was what mattered. With only the two of them left in the arena, Zeke challenged Rick to demonstrate the martial arts he was so proud of. Rick charged forward, unleashing his full-strength technique without hesitation. Before the attack could land, a golden light flashed from Zeke's eyes. A single punch followed. Rick was sent flying across the arena. The silence that followed was absolute. Zeke casually acknowledged Rick's training, a remark that only deepened the shock rippling through the audience. Rick remained on his knees, stunned and unable to respond. Many students openly agreed with Leica's earlier sentiment. Praising Rick's training felt absurd when he had been defeated before showing anything at all. Far away at the West Hall training grounds, the atmosphere was equally grim. Students lay scattered across the ground, groaning and clutching their injuries. One man looked down on them with clear disdain, declaring every last one of them useless. He was Vanel Fafnald Elragan, a candidate for the position of the next family head. Soon reinforcements arrived. Alan, Vanel's right-hand man and a 3-star, reported that the selection process had concluded. Behind him stood the other 3-star students who had passed, including Retin, a lower-classman who was only 12 years old. Vanel immediately took interest in Retin. Upon confirming that the boy had already reached 3-star level, Vanel openly praised him. He valued capable individuals and hinted that Retin could earn a place under him if he proved useful. Retin bowed deeply, thrilled by the acknowledgement. With Vanel present, he believed there was no chance the West Hall would lose to the others. Retin was confident that success in the special mission would secure Vanel's position as the next family head. When that happened, he would become a direct subordinate of immense status. As they spoke, Alan stepped closer and quietly relayed new information. Lady Leica would be participating in the East Hall selection team. The news visibly irritated Vanel. He regarded Leica as a persistent nuisance. Still, he dismissed the concern. No matter how exceptional she was, he believed victory would belong to them. Once again, Vanel declared that he would complete the special mission and prove to his older brothers that the seat of family head rightfully belonged to him. From the very instant the match was announced, the arena exploded into life. Cheers didn't merely rise, they crashed like tidal waves, rolling in from every corner of the stands. Students packed the grounds so tightly that it looked less like a tournament venue and more like a festival that had spiraled completely out of control. Voices overlapped, excitement ran wild, and the noise reached a level that made thinking feel optional. Lingus arrived alongside Leica and the rest of their group. He turned slowly, scanning the massive crowd, his expression frozen somewhere between shock and regret. The number of students present was far beyond what he had expected, and his thoughts reflected that clearly. Leica standing just behind him, she lifted her head, surveyed the arena, and noted calmly that the number of participants alone made this event anything but ordinary. Lingus responded with a quiet sigh. As the noise swelled around him, an old memory surfaced uninvited. His father's calm voice echoed faintly in his thoughts, reminding him that those who ran away were never meant to stand here in the first place. Only the real ones remained. The so-called fake dragons had already filtered themselves out. Realizing this, Lingus acknowledged inwardly that his father had been right all along. Leica, meanwhile, seemed completely untouched by the pressure. Her eyes sparkled with confidence as she observed Lingus's tension. To her, there was nothing to fear. They were already strong enough to represent the East Building. A light poke to Lingus's shoulder followed, as if physically reminding him that pride was allowed in moments like this. Lingus gave a small smile in response, resolving to give it his best effort. Behind them, the roar of the crowd continued to climb, growing louder by the second. Amid the chaos stood Zeke. His posture remained straight, calm and unmoving, like a statue that had accidentally been placed among overexcited students. While everyone else was caught up in the excitement, Zeke observed quietly, noting that the crowd was far too worked up. Leica turned toward him, curious, but Zeke showed no outward concern. His arms crossed, gaze fixed forward, as though nothing of importance was happening. Still, his composure felt strange. No matter how intense the atmosphere became, he remained unnervingly steady. In truth, Zeke wasn't ignoring the situation. He was analyzing it. He was measuring the combat ability of every student who had gathered for the competition, silently categorizing strengths and weaknesses like someone browsing items in a shop. When Leica realized what he was actually doing, she froze after thinking it through. She admitted to herself that this behavior was exactly what she should have expected from Zeke. Even so, the realization sent a faint chill through her. Suddenly, Zeke's eyes shifted. From the opposite side of the arena, two students came running toward the stage. Zeke calmly noted that they had changed significantly since the last time he had seen them. Lingus, standing nearby, agreed. The two approaching figures were senior members of the East Wing, Reek and Irene. Both rushed forward with clear urgency, their excitement obvious as they closed in on the stage. As they neared, Reek abruptly stopped. His eyes widened as disbelief washed over his face. In the next instant, a terrifying pressure erupted. Zeke's eyes gleamed with a sharp golden light, releasing an overwhelming presence that locked directly onto Reek. Now, standing before Zeke once again, Reek felt as though death itself was watching him. Gathering his resolve, he bowed slightly in genuine respect toward overwhelming strength. Zeke paid him no attention, lowering his gaze as if nothing noteworthy had happened. At that moment, Lingus clung desperately to Zeke's leg, visibly shaken. The sudden release of pressure had scared him senseless. Zeke looked down calmly, unfazed, and internally concluded that if fear worked as a deterrent, then it wasn't a bad result. His attention then shifted to the other senior members nearby. One by one, he evaluated them in silence. Then his gaze moved again, this time settling on a newly arrived group. Among them stood the true genius of the wing, a 4-star talent named Venial. Venial walked at the front, his presence sharp and controlled, followed closely by 2 subordinates who radiated strength well above average. Zeke observed them without emotion, acknowledging that there were indeed a few students worthy of real combat. A faint spark stirred within him as anticipation quietly built. Elsewhere, Leica lifted her head and turned to Lingus, urging him to prepare himself for what lay ahead. Before she could say more, a figure rushed in suddenly. A girl sprinted straight toward Leica and wrapped her in a tight embrace. Overflowing with excitement, it was Leica's cousin. The hug was enthusiastic enough to nearly knock Leica off balance, fueled by relief and joy as the arena continued to thunder around them. The girl looked like a more polished version of Leica, more mature, more composed, like an older sister sculpted from the same blueprint. Zeke glanced over briefly, his expression tightening just a little as recognition flickered through his thoughts. The older sister finally pulled back to inspect Leica closely, clearly relieved to see her unharmed and thriving. Leica reassured her calmly that everything had been going well. Hearing this, the older sister smiled and gently patted Leica's head, affection evident in every movement. Then her expression shifted. Her sharp gaze swept over the nearby students as she assessed them critically. Leica nodded and introduced them as her classmates. She then added that the elegant girl standing behind her was her cousin, Sandy Typhonia, the daughter of the head of the Typhonia family. Sandy's presence was refined and dignified, unmistakably noble. Behind Leica, Selena and Raymond stiffened in shock. The realization hit hard. The Typhonia family was one of the 4 greatest families. Sandy then turned her attention to the others, questioning who they were. Leica explained that they were her classmates and friends. Sandy's gaze narrowed slightly. While friendship was acceptable, she openly questioned whether they were far too weak to stand beside a future family head as cadets. Her words were sharp, cutting directly into Lingus, Selena, and Raymond. The 3 froze as humiliation washed over them. At that moment, Zeke spoke calmly, stating that such judgments would be corrected after seeing them fight. There was a trace of mockery beneath his composure. Sandy's attention snapped toward him, cold and piercing. Leica quickly introduced Zeke as a fellow cadet, hesitating before mentioning the rumors surrounding his birth. Sandy responded with clear disdain, openly questioning how someone like him could stand there with confidence. Leica frowned at Sandy's behavior, but Sandy dismissed her concerns. To her, Zeke's existence alone made him a rival, someone standing in Leica's path. She continued, asserting that surrounding oneself with weak companions would only hinder growth, her gaze flicking dismissively toward the others. Zeke ignored the provocation entirely. His expression remained relaxed, as he calmly warned that underestimating them would lead to regret. Though spoken lightly, the words carried undeniable weight. Sandy's fury flared as she stepped forward, unleashing insults and accusations, questioning his right to speak at all. Zeke met her glare without hesitation. A smirk curved his lips as pressure quietly spread from his body. He dismissed her words as irrelevant, stating that if she truly wanted answers, she should stop posturing and see for herself. Sandy froze, rage choking her breath. Before the situation could escalate further, a senior student stepped between them and firmly shut it down. The tension lingered thickly as the arena roared on. The senior then revealed himself as Eldridge Van Blade, representative of the North Wing. Lingus recognized him instantly, noting his exceptional strength. Sandy tried to dismiss him, but Eldridge refused to ignore the disturbance. With the tournament about to begin, such chaos was unacceptable. Before she could respond, heavy footsteps echoed across the arena. An instructor arrived, and with him came overwhelming pressure. Crimson-golden energy surged outward as his presence dominated the field. The moment he spoke, the atmosphere shifted completely. He announced the official start of the selection tournament, known as the leader of the Golden Dragon Squad. His cold reputation and ruthless methods were legendary. As his authority settled over the arena, students froze in place. Linga stiffened, Selena straightened instinctively. Leica's expression sharpened with focus. Only one person remained unaffected. Zeke. There was no fear on his face. No tension either. He grinned instead, like someone who just found a bonus stage. A quiet laugh escaped him. This wasn't pressure. It was a chance to beat up stronger seniors. And just like that, the competition finally got interesting. Menric addresses everyone and announces that the elimination rounds are about to begin. He explains that the tournament will be a survival-style, showdown between the four pavilions. He states that the pavilions will first be divided into two groups, and the winners from each group will later face each other in the grand final. He clarifies that the combat format will be based on individual duels. Menric further explains that each pavilion will send its warriors one by one, strictly following the order that was already decided. From the 7 participants of each pavilion, the side that manages to defeat 4 opponents first will be declared the winner, while the rest will lose, deciding the second and first positions accordingly. He makes it clear that once the contest has begun, changing the starting order will not be allowed. He reminds everyone that the order of the combatants itself is a crucial part of the overall strategy. Menric then adds one final point, revealing that those selected through this tournament will be assigned a special mission. He emphasizes that this mission is of vital importance to the Eldragon family. Completing it would count as an immense contribution to the clan, and contributing to the Eldragon family carries only one true meaning. As this sinks in, Zeke reacts with a confident smile, clearly energized by what he has heard. At the same time, Leica listens carefully, taking in every detail. Venal, on the other hand, smirks to himself, thinking that this tournament is the very first step toward claiming the throne of the family leader. Menric then announces that the draw for the groups will now begin. The tension in the air rises as the process officially starts. He calls for the representatives of each pavilion to step forward and take a stone from the box, beginning with the representative of the West Pavilion. Venal moves first and selects a stone. Menric acknowledges him and tells him that he may leave. Seeing this, Leica is visibly shocked as she realizes who it is. Zeke notices her reaction and wonders what is wrong. Asking if she knows that person, Leica confirms that she does, explaining that he is the candidate to succeed the East Warden she had mentioned before, Venial Fafnald, the dragon. Zeke reflects on this revelation and realizes that it is not just Venial who is dangerous. In general, the West Warden Haviland commands extremely powerful warriors. While the other wardens have trained hard, everyone can clearly feel that the gap in power between them is overwhelming. His attention then shifts to another young warrior. He notes that he has not seen this kid's face in a long time. The boy had already shown great potential during the entrance exam, but reaching the 3-star level at such a young age is something completely unheard of. Zeke acknowledges that it seems the boy has been truly dedicated to his training, and concludes that the growth he is witnessing is genuinely impressive. Letton grits his teeth as he notices Rangis among the representatives, anger rising within him as he wonders what Rangis is doing there. Around them, the students erupt into loud shouts as they recognize Rangis. They mock him openly, pointing him out and calling him a loser, questioning why someone like him would be standing in such a place. Rangis becomes visibly nervous under the attention. He panics for a moment, then forces himself to calm down, reassuring himself that he is fine and that everything is okay. As the noise settles, the process continues smoothly. The next announcement is made, calling for the North Pavilion representative. The turn officially shifts to them. Edge smiles confidently, noting that it is now their turn. Menric acknowledges it and signals for the next representative to step forward. A girl with purple hair walks up and picks up a stone, completing her role as the pavilion's representative. Soon after, the final call is made for the East Pavilion representative, marking the last draw of the round. Leica nudges Zeke forward, urging him to go since he is being called. Zeke reacts with surprise, unsure if he is the one meant to step up. Leica reassures him, stating that of course it has to be him, as he is the strongest among them all. Zeke hesitates and reflects that in tournaments like this, younger participants should take the spotlight instead. Leica immediately counters him, reminding him that they are the same age and pushing him to move already. Zeke sighs in frustration and reluctantly agrees, muttering under his breath as he steps forward. At that moment, Sandy suddenly intervenes, questioning why Zeke, the illegitimate son, is going instead of Leica. Leica responds calmly, explaining that the reason is simple. Because Zeke is the strongest in their group, Menric calls all the representatives to attention and instructs them to infuse their original power into the drink they have just taken. Zeke proceeds to take his stone as instructed. Soon, the stones held by all the representatives begin to glow brightly. Reacting to the infused power, Menric announces that with this process complete, the groups are now decided. He declares that the first match will be between the East Pavilion and the North Pavilion. He then announces that the second match will be between the West Pavilion and the South Pavilion. As this is revealed, Jill from the North Pavilion looks toward Zeke. Rangi's, watching the scene in fear, is shocked by Zeke's presence and struggles to believe that someone like him is also a student. Leica observes quietly and acknowledges that it appears to be true. She then reflects on the situation, still unable to believe that they will be facing Sister Sandy right in the first round. Sandy confronted Leica, making it clear that this was the perfect opportunity for her to open her eyes. She vowed to crush Leica properly, intending to engrave the lesson deep into her memory. Through this defeat, Sandy wanted Leica to remember her position and never lose sight of her true goal. Leica answered with a confident smirk, fully welcoming the challenge. To her, the situation sounded ideal, and she showed no hesitation or fear. As the tension settled, Edge observed the unfolding matchup. It became obvious that they would be facing each other in the first round. He expressed genuine excitement, eager to see exactly what his opponent was capable of. Meanwhile, Zeke reacted with loud enthusiasm. He found the situation amusing and felt they would get along well. The thought of the battle ahead thrilled him, and he openly looked forward to finally getting started. As anticipation reached its peak, Zeke's impatience took over. He could no longer wait and was desperate to jump into the fight without losing even a single second. Venal felt extremely bored while watching all this unfold. The other students, however, were observing everything with full attention, their eyes fixed on the scene. Zeke's team and Sandy's team were about to face each other head-on. The atmosphere slowly grew tense as the confrontation drew closer. A boy named Menric announced the matchup angrily, declaring that the first battle would be between the East Wing and the North Wing. His voice echoed through the area, making the situation feel official and serious. Rick responded with strong enthusiasm, confidently stating that his team would secure the victory without fail. His words carried determination, but the pressure of the moment was evident. Leica, noticing Rick closely, wondered if he would be able to handle the situation. To her, Rick looked unusually nervous, and that concern lingered in her expression. Zeke also appeared confused as he observed Rick, unsure of how the fight would unfold. Menric then announced that both sides were ready and officially began the match. With that signal, the long-awaited battle finally started. The first fight began between Rick and another boy. Rick charged forward with full confidence, putting all his strength and resolve into his opening move. Watching from the side, Zeke commented to Leica that they would now see how things turned out. His tone suggested calm interest rather than concern. Leica, still uneasy, felt that the situation looked difficult based on how things were unfolding. The tension in the air made the outcome feel uncertain. Zeke responded by stating that in the world of competition, nothing was absolute. He made it clear that certainty rarely existed in such battles. He then added that he himself was different and that his own victory was always absolute. His confidence sharply contrasted with the uncertainty surrounding the others. Leica made it clear that she had not been asking about him. Her focus remained on Rick and the ongoing fight. Zeke shifted the topic and explained that, judging purely by skill level, the North Wing fighters were not much different from Rick. From his perspective, the gap in strength was not significant. He added that if they fought the way they usually did, the match was winnable. His analysis suggested that experience and consistency could tip the scales. Leica, however, pointed out that this was the first time they were fighting in front of such a large audience. The unfamiliar pressure of so many eyes watching could easily affect their performance. She also acknowledged that since this was a team match, everyone felt the pressure even more deeply. The weight of representing the team made the battle far more intense than usual. The scene then shows Rick gradually falling behind his opponent. He proves too weak to keep up, taking heavy damage and suffering serious injuries as the fight continues. As Zeke observes this situation, he calmly comments to Leica that this is true, but that point should be set aside for the moment. He then explains that those two fighters are exceptions. Leica reacts in a tense state, suddenly realizing that he is referring to her and that person as well. Zeke explains that those two already have 1 foot in the 4-star level. Because of that, they would not hesitate so easily in a real fight. As he thinks to himself, Zeke recalls that Sandy is Leica's cousin and believes she should be able to handle a similar fighting style. For Leica, he considers this experience to be a good stimulus for growth. Soon after, Menric announces that it is enough and declares the first round over, with the North Wing taking the win. Rick loses the match. His opponent strikes him so brutally that Rick ends up half-bald, lying injured on the ground and unable to move properly. One of Rick's teammates, crying from frustration and pressure, resolves that she has to win no matter what. Leica encourages her, saying that as long as she does not get too nervous, everything will be fine. Despite that encouragement, the second round also ends with the North Wing winning again. Leica becomes visibly frustrated as the losses pile up. The two teammates, a boy and a girl, step forward and apologize to Zeke for losing. Zeke smiles and explains that they were completely carried away by the intense atmosphere of the place. They apologize once again, but Zeke reassures them not to worry. He explains that if this were a real battlefield where life and death were decided, the outcome would be very different. He reminds them that this is a learning place where they compete using their own skills. It is not about killing each other. He adds that bitter experiences like today's can only be accumulated in a safe environment like this. He firmly believes that this failure will one day become fuel for them on the battlefield, and he urges them to keep working hard. Hearing this, both of them shout a strong yes in response. Zeke then points out that even so, the team has suddenly suffered 2 losses in a row. He stresses that this makes the next match extremely important and directs this remark toward Rangiz. He then turns toward Rangiz with a cheerful expression. Rangiz responds in panic, begging Zeke not to make him any more nervous. He admits that he has been extremely nervous since the morning. He mentions Class A and Class B in his anxious rambling, and then adds that his opponent is that terrifying senior. Overcome with fear, Rangiz starts crying and tightly grabs onto Zeke. Zeke calmly asks if the senior is Lin, and reminds Rangiz that he already fought against them when the teams were chosen. Rangiz, still terrified, explains that there was no one in the East Wing with such a frightening appearance. He expresses his fear at the thought of having to defeat such a terrifying senior in front of so many people. Zeke lets out a quiet sigh and thinks that there is no other choice. He realizes that he will have to use a different method to encourage Rangiz. Zeke then laughs lightly, places his hand on Rangiz's shoulder, and points toward Rangiz's opponent, telling him to look carefully at his opponent. Rangiz reacts in confusion, not immediately understanding what Zeke means. Zeke calmly directs his focus to the opponent's weapon and makes Rangiz think about what the opponent is holding. Rangiz identifies the weapon as a sword. Though his answer comes hesitantly, Zeke pushes the thought further, making the idea sink in clearly. He explains that the one Rangiz will fight is nothing more than an inhuman opponent wielding a sword. He tells Rangiz not to think about anything else. He explains that if the opponent attacks with the sword, Rangiz should dodge. If the opponent raises the sword to cut, Rangiz should back off. If the opponent lowers the sword to attack, Rangiz should advance and strike. Zeke instructs him to concentrate only on responding the same way he always does to a weapon called a sword. He emphasizes that this alone is enough. Rangiz listens carefully and responds with growing confidence, stating that he will act as he always does. Seeing Rangiz regain his confidence, Zeke smiles inwardly. He thinks that Rangiz certainly has an excellent capacity for concentration. For now, he believes Rangiz still needs guidance to focus properly. Zeke further reflects that once Rangiz can concentrate naturally on his own, he will be able to aim for an even higher level. He wonders how much Rangiz will grow after this battle. Nearby, other students begin mocking Rangiz, pointing out the difference in physique, and claiming that someone so weak could never become a ranker. Rangiz responds by glaring at them with a deadly look, silencing their ridicule. Soon after, Menric announces the start of the match between the two fighters, smoothly shifting the focus back to the arena. The moment the match begins, Rangiz's opponent launches an instant attack, using the 3-blade sword technique and executing a 1-blade cut. The sword swings sharply toward Rangiz, but Rangiz successfully dodges the strike. Angered, the opponent insults him and tells him not to run away. Without hesitation, the opponent follows up by activating the 3-blade sword technique once again, pressing the attack even further. The opponent then activates the From Dew Leaves Formation technique and launches another powerful attack. Rangiz blocks it effortlessly, showing no sign of panic. Seeing the situation escalate, Leica becomes tense with worry for Rangiz. Rangiz's other friends observe closely and note that the opponent is closing the distance where Rangiz is most skilled. They grow anxious about whether Rangiz will be able to handle it. Zeke carefully observes the scene and smiles calmly, telling them not to worry so much. He points out that they should look at Rangiz's eyes, explaining that Rangiz is deeply concentrated. The focus shifts to Rangiz as his blue eyes begin to shine brightly. His opponent continues attacking relentlessly, but Rangiz keeps dodging each strike with precision. Frustration builds as the opponent grits his teeth in anger and unleashes the three-bladed sword technique, executing the chaotic three-leaf dance. At that moment, Rangiz's eyes glow even brighter as he activates the cloud and water spear technique. Using the passing cloud's flowing water technique, he cleanly blocks the incoming attack, leaving his opponent visibly shocked. Without giving any time to recover, Rangiz uses the cloud and water spear technique again and follows up with flood drilling. Rangiz drives his polearm forward with tremendous force, striking his opponent directly in the chest. The impact is decisive, leaving the opponent fully injured and unconscious on the ground. Menric quickly steps in and announces that it is enough. He declares the third round over and announces that the East Wing has won. Rangiz exhales deeply and gives a weak smile, feeling a strong sense of relief after the intense fight. Zeke lets out a small chuckle and remarks that they finally seem to be turning things around.